3 minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning to you. James, please, writes Dan, make it make sense. I watched all night and I really don't understand what happened. Gemma in Newcastle upon Tyne, right? So I have absolutely no idea, James. I'm waiting for you to explain it to me. Andy in Lincoln is being a little less generous. He says, please stop acting thick, James. You know exactly what happened. Natalie says, James, I need you to explain it, please. And Ryrie, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here because I'm reading texts live on the radio. I haven't actually read them before I came on air, so I can start reading them and they might go a little bit weird halfway through. James, please don't put me in idiot's corner. Maybe naivety corner, but why is it that last night was such an important issue for the SNP stroke Tories? Why not stay and debate everything? I can't quite get my head around why they would be so outraged and leave the chamber rather than debate each of the aspects properly. And a fond remembrance there of our mutual friend Theo Usherwood, who did indeed have a peculiar gift for explaining these madnesses without upsetting anybody. I think I know what happened. But I'm going to come at it, if I may, from a slightly different angle to begin with. Yesterday morning, Keir Starmer was facing the possibility of possibly the worst parliamentary moment of his premiership. You have seen the desperate efforts that that the Conservative Party and their cheerleaders in the media have put into attempts to portray him as somehow stumbling at the moment. The poll lead remains pretty much every poll has him 20 points or more ahead. The desperation to pretend that the change on the spending pledges regarding net zero brought about, rendered inevitable by Liz Truss, immolating the British economy to the tune of some £30 billion is somehow a sign of weakness. There are people who fear that he bends over too far to remove weapons from the hands of his foes, but the effectiveness of removing weapons from the hands of the foes remains impressive. So yesterday morning he was facing possibly his worst moment in Parliament as leader of the Labour Party, because many of his MPs, up to and including senior ministers, are very keen, perhaps even desperate, to vote for a ceasefire in the Middle East, to join Prince William and countless others in calling for the killing to stop. The killing now, with the grim and disgusting spectacle of October the 7th in our rearview mirror, the killing now almost exclusively of Palestinians. And the massive majority of them are civilians and, of course, children. And as things stood, because of parliamentary rubric, it would have been impossible for the Labour MPs keen to vote for a ceasefire to do so without voting for an SNP motion, which went a little bit further in the context of, or rather didn't go as far in the context of conditions as in meaningful legislation. Here is what would have to happen in order for us to call for a ceasefire, as Keir Starmer wanted it to. So I think that the issue perhaps of collective punishment became crucial, the accusation of collective punishment. This is where you perhaps are paying even more attention than I was. And that created a scenario in which Keir Starmer faced a massive rebellion. I would imagine close to triple figures. I am told that 2 senior ministers were poised to resign their front bench positions if they were not free to vote for the SNP motion, which was measurably different from the Labour Party current position, but not different enough to dissuade Labour MPs and Labour ministers from wanting to vote for it. So yesterday morning, this time yesterday, Keir Starmer was staring down the barrel of a gun. By yesterday evening, the SNP leader in Westminster, Stephen Flynn, had led his members out of the chamber while complaining that everybody else was treating it like a pantomime. Nothing says stop treating things like a pantomime than marching off stage, presumably shouting, "Oh, no, we won't." The Conservatives were in complete disarray to the point where they didn't vote at all for the ceasefire that a significant number of their MPs actually want, while the Labour Party passed happily through the lobby to vote in favour of the motion that they had brought, or the amendment that they had brought to the SNP motion. So what was everybody actually cross about? Well, I'm going to say you tell me. 0345 6060 973. I'm going to say you tell me. Because what they were cross about specifically was the decision by Lindsay Hoyle to allow votes on both the Conservative amendment and the Labour amendment. The Conservative amendment was brought in the hope of scuppering the Labour amendment, because the tradition is that the government's amendment would have priority over the opposition party's amendment on the SNP's day for being in charge. So they had their noses put squarely out of joint, up to and including the point where they seemed to prioritise, I don't want to say political point scoring, but they did seem to prioritise partisan interest over the actual bloody ceasefire. All of this is up for grabs, by the way. All of this is open to criticism. All of this is absolutely primed for you to dismantle. Because if I'm completely honest, I'm not as clear as I should be on exactly what happened. I'm not a massive fan of Lindsay Hoyle. I don't really like saying that because the Speaker is an independent position. And when John Bercow became a sort of target for all the Brexit liars, it was a horrible thing to witness. And of course, it subsequently emerged that John Bercow's record was rather badly scarred in the context of how he treated some colleagues. But I don't like it. It's a bit like attacking the referee, isn't it? It's the ultimate footballification. You don't like the way the result has gone, you're going to attack the referee. But the more you attack the referee, the more you actually threaten and compromise the rules, the only rules by which we can actually play. There are little instances of hilarity, if you like. Conservatives who cheered Boris Johnson to the rafters as he lied and lied and lied again in the House of Commons, rode roughshod over parliamentary standards, ignored his own advisor on ministerial ethics, failed to appoint one after two had resigned, and routinely denigrated the most arcane and important of traditions, up to and including the Code for Parliamentary Standards. When his mate Owen Paterson rode all over it, Boris Johnson and his pals tried to rip up the actual code. So to see Tories suddenly discovering a deep reverence, the Tories who, of course, cheered when Jacob Rees-Mogg went to Balmoral to lie to the Queen about the unlawful prorogation of Parliament. So you've got people now claiming, in fact, some of them have signed this motion, this early day motion that Nick was talking about towards the end of his programme with Natasha. People who are signing this early day motion who were cool with the unlawful prorogation of Parliament itself. People who were in favour of the unlawful prorogation of Parliament itself have suddenly discovered a deep and abiding reverence for parliamentary rules. Oh no, that's absolutely awful. He's given an early day. He's given priority to the opposition party when tradition dictates that it should be the government party. But I'm absolutely fine with Jacob Rees-Mogg lying to the Queen about the unlawful prorogation of Parliament. The scale of hypocrisy on display today is actually nuclear. Absolutely nuclear. But here we are. I don't even blame some of the MPs that have signed this motion, because their brains are so boiled by Brexit and Boris Johnson, they've forgotten which way is up and which way is down. What is it? What are we signing? We're very cross about something the Speaker did. But why weren't we cross about that time that Boris Johnson lied to the House of Commons? Why weren't we cross about that time that they unlawfully... It doesn't matter. Don't ask silly questions. Just sign the bloody motion. If enough people sign it, Lindsay Hoyle will have to resign. And the point at which I think these Tory MPs and some of the SNP MPs should perhaps pause is this point. What's the win here? If Lindsay Hoyle resigns because the number of MPs queuing up to claim they have no confidence in him exceeds an as yet unspecified number, who actually wins? And what the hell does it do for the people on the Gaza Strip who could perhaps have drawn some succour and comfort from the thought that the British political establishment last night finally found the cojones to pass a call for a ceasefire? Albeit that the people who have led the line on calling for a ceasefire, the SNP, didn't vote for it. They, I'm afraid, as far as I can tell, tried to take their ball home, by which point Lindsay Hoyle had punctured their ball and instead inflated a new one and given it to the Labour Party, while the Conservative Party were whining that it should be their ball first and Labour shouldn't have a ball in the game at all. So if you were expecting me to explain it to you, and clearly from the texts I read at the beginning of the programme, lots of people were, I fear I've let you down. Let me have a look at some more texts, shall I? What about Starmer threatening Hoyle? No mention of that. Well, I've just mentioned it. It's been denied by everybody involved, but you keep clinging to that if you want. As I understand it, Starmer intervened with Hoyle and pointed out that some of his MPs who rebelled last time, if they had to follow the whip this time, would be facing threats and violence. Whether or not the Speaker should ever take that into account when taking a decision such as the one he took, I genuinely don't know. But I'm afraid that line about the threats, despite coming from one of the most august political journalists in the country, who I've had the great pleasure of working with, did seem to deflate a little as the day went on. So here's what I can't see anybody arguing with. Yesterday, and I think this is why everyone's so furious, from backbench MPs whose scarves are tied so tightly round their neck, none tighter, of course, than the chair of the 1922 committee. It's literally his job to support the Conservative Parliamentary Party, whatever they do, however awful they are. It rarely does footballification seem so clear to me. So what no one can argue with is this. Yesterday morning, Keir Starmer was facing possibly his worst day in Parliament as Labour leader. By yesterday evening, the Conservative Party was having a fit of the vapours and the SNP had taken their ball home, while Labour actually passed a ceasefire motion in the House of Commons for the first time since this bloody nightmare in the Middle East began. That's why the Tories are so furious, because Labour somehow pulled victory out of the fire. The SNP are furious because they wanted to be seen as the leaders on this occasion, or they're furious because of the trumping by Lindsay Hoyle of parliamentary tradition and procedure, something for which he was ticked off by his own clerk. And the Labour Party, if you like, are, what's the word we want here? Embarrassed, despite their victory, partly because of them, but largely because of the Conservatives and the SNP, a debate that should be historic with regard to calling for a ceasefire in Gaza instead looks like being historic because of the pathetic behaviour of many, many MPs. So there is my analysis. Please tear it to shreds. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. If we want to make it a little less personal, as in tearing my analysis to shreds, I tell you what I'd like to do. And in a way, I need a couple of phone lines for this. So we might have to put some people who've already rung in on pause. In a way, I'd really like you, and I'm going to insist, I know I've just taken about half an hour to do it, so this is incredibly hypocritical and unfair of me, but hey-ho, it's my show. Oh, I've got a new catchphrase. Hey-ho, it's my show. You explain what you think happened. In, 5 sentences? What do you think is a reasonable number of sentences in which to do it? So, invitation number 1, here's my analysis. Please tear it to shreds. 0345 6060 973. And invitation number 2, you tell me what happened. Ignore what I've just said. You tell me what you think happened yesterday in the House of Commons. You've got 5 sentences in which to do it. A couple of texts. The biggest disappointment for me was Stephen Flynn. He's been a real voice recently. For me yesterday, he was childlike. I don't shoot the messenger. I'm just reading it out. Labour have effectively failed to support a ceasefire, says Brian, because of the conditions which allow the Israelis off the hook. Loosen the scarf around your neck, James, says Brian. May well be a valid criticism. And the MPs didn't go through the division on the Gaza ceasefire vote. It was decided on a nod. Perhaps it would be a better debate if James got some facts right. That seems to be a perfectly reasonable criticism as well. But I'd like to conjure up the imagery of parliamentary procedure. The point is, of course, that the amendment passed. It's 10:17. We're 21 minutes after 10. Three things that could have been put before the House of Commons yesterday, but only two were. Grossly unfair for the SNP, according to tradition, because it was essentially their turn, and they only get, I think, 3 a year. But the key difference is in what the amendment said. The motion said immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel, immediate release of all hostages taken by Hamas, and an end to the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Collective punishment is, of course, a war crime, so for that motion to pass would have involved the British Parliament essentially acknowledging or accusing Israel of war crimes. The Labour amendment didn't go as far in some areas. It called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and this is their words, which means an immediate stop to the fighting and a ceasefire that lasts and is observed by all sides. That was nodded through. The amendment also specified that Israel cannot be expected to cease fighting if Hamas continues with violence, and that Israelis have the right to the assurance that the horror of the 7th of October cannot happen again, and it then set out support for efforts to achieve a lasting ceasefire. The Tories' amendment, which was designed essentially to spike Labour's guns, or rather just to keep them off the order paper, to keep them off the schedule, it called for an immediate humanitarian pause with the aim of leading to a ceasefire later. It also set out support for Israel's right to self-defense in compliance with international humanitarian law. So you could be forgiven for thinking that there's not a great deal of difference between all of these amendments, except perhaps the inclusion of that phrase collective punishment, which is a war crime, and perhaps constitutes the reason why Keir Starmer didn't want his MPs to vote for it. So what do you think happened yesterday? Let's start in Scotland, where most of the anger seems to have coalesced. Alistair is in East Lothian. Alistair, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good morning.
Hello. What's going on?
Hi. Yes, it is a complete burach, as we would say up here. It's a mess, and the important message around Gaza seems to have been lost in amongst all this party politicking.
Yeah.
However, there are some real fundamental issues at stake here. Normally, in an opposition day, and you're right saying that the SNP gets 3, Labour gets 17.
Yes.
And for several months, this is the second time that the SNP has used an opposition day to put forward a motion for a ceasefire in Gaza. That's how important they are. They've been extremely consistent and unwavering in that point.
And last time they did it, there was no prospect of Labour offering up their own amendment, which pretty much did the same thing as the original motion, except for that phrase collective punishment. So the picture has changed. And I need to point something out to you, Alistair, that you may not like.
Yeah.
You've moved effortlessly from joining me in bemoaning the fact that all of this seems to forget the plight of the people in Gaza to complaining about parliamentary procedure that will appear quite recondite, even perhaps trivial. Well, it will certainly appeal trivial to a mum in Rafah wondering how she's going to feed her kids tonight, and it may even appear trivial or irrelevant to people who are not big fans of the SNP.
I understand why you would say that. However, I think it strikes further at a democratic issue within Westminster. And the point I was going to make is that opposition days are, by convention, a party puts forward a motion. The government puts forward their view on it. There is a vote, and one is carried and the other drops. What has happened is that Labour has had several months to firm up a position on a ceasefire, and Keir Starmer has sat on his hands.
I would dispute that, but not today. We can let that stand for the purposes of today's conversation.
But there has been a significant shift in public opinion in the last few weeks, particularly since the vast amount of populations have been trapped into Rafah and the threats that are being made currently.
The facts have changed. Yeah. The facts have changed. So therefore, policies change. I don't think that's unreasonable or involves hand-sitting.
So what has happened is that Labour yesterday realised that effectively they were caught with their pants down, and this is in the lead up to an election.
Yeah, but it still sounds like SNP sour grapes, however you dress it up, Alistair. Because here is an opportunity to vote for a ceasefire in Gaza, and your lot elected not to take it.
Well, wait a minute. Okay. You're saying it's SNP sour grapes. What happened?
I'm saying
yesterday?
that's what you sound like. I mean, I've been clear from the start. I wasn't paying that much attention yesterday because I was busy writing the new chapter for the paperback version of my book. So I do apologise,
Sure.
but that's what you sound like.
Okay, and I accept that. However, what happened yesterday was effectively that the Labour Party, by being allowed to act against protocol and convention, effectively removed the SNP opposition motion.
Which is a valid grievance, and it's one that's unique to the SNP, because the Tories don't suddenly get to pretend that they care about such matters, having cheered Boris Johnson's utter contempt for all parliamentary procedure and tradition to the rafters for 2 or 3 years, or more if you include Brexit. So there's a valid SNP grievance here, but it's a grievance with Lindsay Hoyle.
What it does, though...
It's a grievance with the Speaker.
No, it's not necessarily.
You can't blame the Labour Party for taking a shot at goal. You can only blame the referee for not blowing the whistle.
What they've done is they've used their position to shoulder aside opposition. I believe... But
we're going to go around in circles now, because this is the point, isn't it, where we part as friends. It is the name on the paper that you're bothered about. It's not what the paper actually says.
No.
Yes.
No, it's not actually, James. It's the fundamental issue that what has now happened is that the two main parties... Yeah,
but what you're cross about is the thing that got nodded through had Labour Party hallmarks on it instead of SNP hallmarks. You're perfectly happy with what got nodded through. It's just the fact that it's got the wrong branding on it. Well, come on, be honest.
That's a Labour Party argument.
It's not. It's the truth.
Well, it's not.
It is.
It's not. The fundamental issue here is that the two main parties can now effectively roll over any opposition day motions.
No, they can't. The Speaker can, and he has explained almost tearfully why he did, and he's expressed regret at what transpired, but that was the Speaker's decision. There's another piece of the jigsaw today that's been picked up by various journalists, that the main reason that the Tories didn't go ahead with it at all and sort of ignored the vote entirely, which meant that it gets nodded through, is because they didn't think they had the numbers. MPs telling journalists on various newspapers that they didn't have the numbers. That's why they did this. And in fact, one minister's told The Guardian, we're not as angry as we're pretending to be, which means that the long list of Tory MPs on this early day motion are almost wearing dunce's caps while looking in the mirror and thinking that they're wearing tiaras. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you as well for keeping things well-mannered. Let's go to Hayden, who's in Croydon. Hayden, I can't quite know. I'll come to Hayden first after the news. This may detain us for 2 hours, this topic, because we haven't made a great deal of progress yet, have we? And it is important to understand why some people are so angry. I'm going to say, and I'll take your criticisms, as long as they're offered up with a fair modicum of civilization, the SNP are largely cross. All of Alistair's brilliant explanations notwithstanding, their main complaint is, we wanted this to have our name on it, and it's got the Labour Party's name on it. We're perfectly happy with what it is. We support what it is. We like what it is. We want what it is, but it should have had our name on it. And that is a fair grievance, albeit one that sounds a little trivial in the context of what was actually under discussion. The Tories are furious because they tried to spike Keir Starmer's guns, and Lindsay Hoyle came along and pulled the spikes out of the guns, which is also a fair grievance, albeit a very petulant and petty one that once again completely ignores the plight of the people of Palestine. And the Labour Party actually secured a vote in the House of Commons for a ceasefire in Gaza, which means that all of the supporters of the last leader, Jeremy Corbyn, will be furious because once again Keir Starmer has demonstrated that he's a lucky general and he is effective when push comes to shove. So everybody's furious, except people that want Labour to form the next government. Does that sound about right? 10:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. It is 10:34. It's worth hearing from Jess Phillips this morning. She was one of the MPs that actually resigned one of the ministers that resigned last time over her need to vote for the SNP motion. She writes, in all the furore, Parliament last night passed a motion calling for an immediate ceasefire, recognition of Palestine and its view on a halt to the invasion in Rafah. So now we have to make that mean something in how our government approaches the conflict. easily to argue that's where the real democratic issue lies, in the question of whether or not the government will enact the express wishes of Parliament. The motion she refers to was passed on a nod because the Tories didn't think they had the numbers to oppose it. The amendment similarly was passed on a nod. So the SNP got their motion through, but the Labour amendment essentially removed, as I understand it, and I'm not exaggerating on the question of not fully being across every dot and comma of this. I was very busy yesterday. The difference being that the accusation of war crimes was removed by the amendment. So everyone who doesn't want Keir Starmer to form the next government is furious. And they haven't really got any grounds for being furious with the Labour Party, so they're furious with Lindsay Hoyle. And that number, I think, is now up to 56. So 56 MPs have signed an early day motion because they can't land a punch on Keir Starmer for what happened yesterday, so they've decided to try to defenestrate Lindsay Hoyle, which is, I think, akin to calling for the referee to be sacked after your team concedes a goal that you feel the striker was offside. That's a brilliant analogy. If I'm taking footballification to its apotheosis, Labour scored a goal yesterday. I mean, it doesn't quite work because it involves the Conservatives and the SNP being on the same team, which oddly, in a sense, they are this morning, but they certainly weren't yesterday. So Labour scored a goal yesterday. The Tories are furious about it. They can't really pin anything on the Labour Party, so they are attacking the referee. That is what you're watching. 56 supporters of Conservative United have signed a motion calling for the referee to be fired, which happens every Saturday afternoon, whatever game you watch. But this being Britain and this being the mad place that it currently is, the political focus, Westminster and the media are watching these numbers creep up, calling for the referee to be fired because they didn't like the way that the other lot scored a goal, as if it is the most important thing happening in the world. And the number is now 57. Whoa, 57 MPs. Stop the traffic. I think what I will do, every time I mention the number of MPs that have signed a motion of no confidence in the Speaker, I'll also mention the current death toll in Gaza. I think that might be a healthy way of illuminating why some of us find this juxtaposition of circumstance so unseemly. 10:37 is the time. Hayden's in Croydon. Hayden, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thanks very much for taking the call.
You're most welcome.
I wanted to talk about the missed opportunity by Stephen Flynn yesterday.
Go on.
Also in the context of comments he made earlier in the week when he was being interviewed by your colleagues on the Newsagents podcast.
Oh, yes.
He was being interviewed by Emily Lewis and John, and they put it to him that Labour's amendment to the SNP proposal that was going to come out yesterday basically came round to their point of view of calling the most important thing, calling for immediate ceasefire.
Yes.
And Stephen Flynn, who I think is an impressive figure in lots of ways,
So
I think
do
he
I.
worked as well on PMQs and all that,
Yeah.
asked the important questions very well. In response to that question on the newsagents, expressed he was very pleased. Said he was delighted that Labour had finally come round to his and the SNP's point of view. And it totally plausible. Sounds exactly right. He was very pleased that basically, with a slightly wordier amendment, Labour were basically putting forward the SNP point of view at long last.
Yes.
Then it came to yesterday, and Lindsay Hoyle made his decision for whatever reason.
Yes. Well, the reason that we've been given is that he was importuned to do so by Keir Starmer after Keir Starmer explained that if his MPs were not offered an opportunity to vote for a Labour amendment and voted instead for the unamended SNP motion, then they would face threats and violence. And
Right.
Lindsay Hoyle, in a tearful speech that we will listen to shortly,
Yes.
Lindsay Hoyle acknowledged that, explained that, and expressed regret at what had transpired as a result of his, I believe, good faith decision to help those MPs avoid those threats and potential violence.
Exactly. I think that's the full reason as well. And by the way, I do not buy any accusations that he was bullied into it in any way, shape, or form by
although that
Starmer
story
or or anyone else.
That story was broken by the Newsnight political editor Nick Watt, who I would put in the well, to paraphrase Brian Clough, I'd put him in the top one of political journalists in the country. So we can't dismiss that out of hand. But carry on.
I think Nick Watt used hyperbole in his initial tweet on the subject.
We don't know.
But anyway, my main point is that earlier in the week, in an interview on the newsagent, Stephen Flynn was delighted that Labour had come round to the SNP's point of view because of the political shenanigans in the House yesterday evening. He is furious with Lindsay Hoyle for allowing that same position by Labour to be given a full airing that earlier in the week he said he was delighted with. In my view, what Stephen Flynn should have done is say, perhaps we're a bit disappointed that convention has been flouted. However, I'm very, very pleased that in the important matter of the day, calling for an immediate ceasefire, Labour has finally come round to the SNP's
to our point of view
that we've been talking about for weeks.
Yeah, I think we're in a similar position, and we would both therefore be open to the accusation that we underestimate the importance of procedure and tradition. And I shall read out this text from Bill to put that position more clearly than I can. Bill writes, I have to say, James, this is one of the few times I've heard you being so partisan. I support the ceasefire, no matter whose name is on it. What yesterday showed, however, is that the Westminster system, whether it be Johnson, May, Sunak, Starmer or the Speaker, is happy to bin convention when it suits the two main parties. These conventions are in place to give the smaller parties some input into the decisions of Parliament. From the removal of the Sewell Convention to Mr Hoyle's decision yesterday, we are watching how the system actually works. Mr Starmer hung Mr Hoyle out to dry. I think that's a valid point and quite a timely moment perhaps to listen to what Lindsay Hoyle had to say yesterday as the chaos began to unfold. It's 4 minutes. I'll pop back briefly afterwards to give you a quick heads up. Well, I'll give you a heads up now, but I'll pop back briefly at the end of this as well. You know how Kemi Badenoch has been accusing the world and his wife of lying and using parliamentary privilege to do so. Well, wouldn't it be inconvenient? I mean, she's been accused of lying by the High Commissioner to Canada, the Canadian High Commissioner already, outside of Parliament, but yesterday she was accused of lying in Parliament. Now, I think that's heading towards a hat trick, isn't it, for the Business Secretary? She's been accused of lying by Henry Staunton, the post office boss that she fired. She's been accused of lying with quite a lot of evidence by the Canadian High Commissioner. And shortly we will reveal who the latest person to accuse Kemi Badenoch of being a big fat liar actually is. In fact, we'll be speaking to them directly. But first, here's Lindsay Hoyle yesterday. It's 4 minutes long, this, so listen to it all, please.
It was my wish to do the best by every member of this House. Yes. I take very seriously. No. The danger is that that's why I wanted everybody to be able to express, because I am very, very concerned about the security of all members. Let me just take this through. I was very concerned, I am still concerned, and that's why the meetings I've had today is about the security of members, their families, and the people that are involved. And I've got to say, I regret how it's ended up. It was not my intention. I wanted all to ensure they could express their views and all sides of the House could vote. As it was, in particular, the SNP were ultimately unable to vote on their proposition. I am, and I regret, with my sadness, that it's ended up on like that, in this position. That was never my intention for it to end up like this. I was absolutely convinced that the decision was done with the right intentions. I recognise the strength of feeling of members on this issue. Clear today has not shown the House at its best. I will reflect on my part in that of the course I recommit myself to ensuring that all members of this House are treated fairly. I do not I do not want it to have ended like this. I want to say to the House, I will meet with all the key players of each party. I think it is right that I meet with each one, and that. Can I just put that correct? I've never met with Sue Gray today. I didn't bump into her today. I'm offended by that comment. I think you'd like to withdraw it. Yeah, because that is the danger that we've ended up with a social speculation of not what is fact and not factual. I am honest to this House. I am true to this House. I believe in all members of this House. And I have tried to do what I thought was the right thing for all sides of this House. It is regrettable, and I apologise for a decision that didn't end up in the place that I wished for. So I would say no. I say no. I will meet with all the. Just be quiet, please. I will meet with the leaders and with the chief whips, and let us have a discussion on what is the best way forward to try and ensure that, and I say again, I thought I was doing the right thing and the best thing, and I regret it and I apologise for how it's ended up. I do take responsibility for my actions, and that's why I want to meet. And that's why I want to meet with the key players who have been involved.
That's quite poignant, actually. I mean, I'm not a member of the Lindsay Hoyle fan club. I think, I don't want to be unkind, but I think he's a bit of a dipstick, a bit of a lettuce. But I don't know how anyone can listen to that and think it didn't come from the heart. It doesn't undermine or change the fact that he is apologising for, presumably he now believes that he made a mistake as a result of events that transpired, but he's not a fortune teller. It's an interesting one, isn't it? 57 MPs have now signed the no confidence motion in the Speaker, and the latest death toll, according to the Health Ministry in Gaza, which is, of course, run by Hamas, the latest death toll in Gaza is 29,313. I'll let you decide which of those numbers is most important. 10:51 is the time. Paul from Peckham says, personally, I think the Speaker was right to do... quite a few of you changing your view on this as a consequence of hearing Lindsay Hoyle's, possibly even the tone as much as the content of what he said in the House of Commons yesterday. Paul adds he did the right thing for the wrong reason. People are intimidating MPs with violent protests. They should go to jail for a long time. It's critical for our democracy that they be able to do their job freely. Of course, it's possible for politicians to do their job too freely. At the end of January, we reported that despite Kemi Badenoch's claims that trade negotiations with Canada were ongoing, the Canadian government had told the Politico correspondent Graham Langtry that they were not. In fact, she stood up in the House of Commons and said she could state explicitly that the talks have not broken down, and discussions on the rules of origin issue were, quotes, ongoing, end quotes. Rather unfortunately for her, Canada's top diplomat in the UK, Ralph Goodale, wrote to the chair of the Commons Business and Trade Committee on Tuesday to say neither negotiations nor technical discussions with respect to any of the outstanding issues had taken place. So some confusion there over quite what Kemi Badenoch's relationship with the truth may be. And this issue came up again yesterday in the House of Commons when Ben Bradshaw, the Labour MP for Exeter, had another question for the Business Secretary. Ben Bradshaw joins me now. What was the question, and did you get an answer?
Well, it was actually to the Prime Minister, James.
Of course it was. Forgive me.
It was about the Business Secretary, because back in December she had quoted again categorically in the House of Commons in a debate that she had engaged extensively with LGBT organisations in this country since she became Equalities Minister 18 months ago. But I spotted a Freedom of Information answer to a question that had been tabled by a member of the public that he published on social media this week, which actually revealed that she hadn't met a single LGBT organisation in her 18 months in the job, but had met two pretty fringe organisations, to be honest, that campaign actively against trans equality. And I put that to the Prime Minister because it seemed to fit into a pattern like the one over Canada, like the one now over the Post Office, about Kemi Badenoch's relationship with the truth.
Did you get a satisfactory answer?
Well, what was interesting is I thought somebody had clearly had a word with the Prime Minister about his disastrous outing 2 weeks ago when he made that transphobic slur in the presence of the mother of Brianna Jai.
I think she was in the building rather than the chamber.
Yeah,
Ben,
she was in the building, but that went down very, very badly. And someone had clearly told Rishi Sunak that he had to say something that was at least a bit more emollient about trans people, which he did, to be fair, but he didn't address the issue of the veracity and accuracy of the Business Secretary and Equalities Minister. And I suspect that this issue is not going to go away, not least because both the Canada and the Post Office scandal are very much ongoing.
Yes, it's quite the hat trick, albeit that it may emerge that she has been telling the truth in all three cases. It'll be hard on this one to see how that might transpire. I have engaged extensively with LGBT groups in my role as Minister for Women and Equalities. Is there any reading under which transgender trend and sex matters could be described as LGBT groups?
No, they're not gay, they're not lesbian, and they're anti-trans, to put it quite simply.
Yes,
and
that's quite comprehensive, isn't it, really?
No, and as well as that, apparently, she hasn't attended a single Pride event. I mean, she would have been invited to countless events, and she would have been, there would have been meeting requests. She's dealing with some very, very important and sensitive issues, including the guidance to schools that's been so controversial, the issues around gender identity and whether we recognise transgender reassignment documents from other countries. So these are very important decisions she's taking, but she's not meeting any of the people that it's her job to meet as Equalities Minister. Now, she doesn't believe in equality. She shouldn't be in the job.
Would it be inappropriate to wonder whose equality it is that she is championing in this role?
I think that's a question you really need to put to her. But she seems to have a blind spot when it comes to LGBT people, and I don't know whether that's about her own prejudices or ideology. But not to meet a single LGBT organisation as Equalities Minister or attend a single event as Equalities Minister would seem to me that she is at least neglecting a significant part of her responsibilities.
And I know she said it on Twitter. I know that she stated on Twitter that she had engaged extensively with LGBT groups, which seems to have been refuted by the Freedom of Information request. Did she say it in the Commons as well? Because that would be... Well, that's a matter of it used to be in the good old days, Ben Bradshaw. That used to matter, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did used to matter. And I suspect that when we have the next opportunity to question her in the House of Commons, that will be put to her, if not by some of my colleagues.
Easy for her to prove that she has, and that the Freedom of Information request is fallacious or flawed, of course.
And I think if the FOI answer had been wrong, and of course that's a mistake of her own department, then she or her press officer would have already pointed that out. But all they've done is they've said, but she's been in email contact with some of these organisations. Right. Well, that could just about to her office saying she's not going to meet them.
True. What happened yesterday in the House of Commons? Unedifying scenes.
Blimey. How long have you got? I mean, essentially, what really matters in the end is that a very good, positive Labour motion went through unopposed. Now, we can have arguments about whether the SNP and the government were playing political games. I mean, I think the Speaker was right, maybe for the wrong reasons, but he was right to give MPs the broadest possible options on an issue as sensitive as this. It wasn't unprecedented. It has happened twice before. And the SNP motion would have been voted on if the Tories hadn't taken their bat and ball away and refused to take part in the whole proceedings. And we nearly didn't get a result because the Tories and the SNP tried to stop there even being a vote on Labour's motion. So it was a real mess. But I think the really important thing about this is that the House of Commons has spoken with one voice in the end, calling for an immediate ceasefire. And it was a very good motion. If
I could just quote someone from the other place to you, Lord Finkelstein, Times columnist, of course, former speechwriter for David Cameron. He says the point is the parliamentary procedure matters, as does precedent and resistance to violent threat and the competence of the Speaker. These are not just sort of pomposity. I can't believe some Labour centrists and media commentators argue this after all the discussion during the Johnson years about the importance of institutions and process. It's like they didn't mean their earlier critique at all.
I have huge respect for Danny, and I agree with him on a lot of things, but I think he's wrong on this. It wasn't precedent, it's convention. There was precedent for the Speaker to do this, and also it's within his right, as his own senior advisor made clear. And I think given the huge public interest and sensitivity of this, and I think the Speaker was right to take into account MP safety. I don't think that was the only reason he did it. But I mean, a lot of my Labour colleagues, for example, really wanted to vote for a ceasefire, but couldn't vote for the SNP motion because it was flawed in their view. And I agree with them. And they have been coming under enormous pressure. And what the Speaker, I think, was trying to do was to give everyone in the House the opportunity to express their view through a vote. We couldn't do that in the end because, as I say, the Tories took their bat away from the whole field. And we nearly didn't get a vote at all. But I hope that, I mean, the government is always open to the government, of course, James, to bring back a substantive motion, which then the SNP and we can amend and everyone can go through the whole process again. But I think there was a lot of sound and fury by the Tories and the SNP yesterday because they thought they'd stitched Labour up and it didn't work.
57 MPs now have signed the vote of no confidence in the Speaker. Is his position fragile, do you think, this morning?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the statement from him last night that you played at length a few minutes ago, I think would have reassured a lot of people. Let's see how the discussions go. I think it would look faintly ridiculous, to be honest, if the government and the SNP ganged up now to try to get rid of a Speaker a few months before a general election when this country is facing so many important challenges over an issue like what's going on in Gaza, which is really serious and should be about the issue there and not about parliamentary shenanigans.
Ben Bradshaw, MP for Exeter, many thanks indeed for your time this morning. That word shenanigans is one of my all-time favourite words. It seems a little, given the context of the continuing carnage in Gaza, it does seem a little glib in the circumstances, but accurate nonetheless. 11:01 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What do you think happened yesterday? Or what do you think people are cross with me about for my sparkling analysis earlier this morning? What is, according to at least one texter, what is the enormous point that I have completely missed? To be fair to me, and indeed to her, it may be a point that I've made since she sent the text, but what a bizarre state of affairs it is when there is more attention this morning on the 57 MPs who signed a no-confidence motion in the Speaker, who has already apologised and expressed what sounded to me like very sincere regret for what transpired as a consequence of his well-meaning decision. That figure of 57 seems to be of infinitely more importance than the current Gazan death toll of 29,313. It's 11:01. It is 5 minutes after 11 and you are, well, do not adjust your sets. Liz Truss has gone mad. You may be thinking that I'm a bit behind the curve on this one or that it isn't news, but the latest interventions from the former Prime Minister are beyond parody and far from funny. This conference that she's attending in America, I think she's sitting next to Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon will be doing a lap of honour. The record of the latter character you should do well to look up, endorsing Donald Trump for leadership and writing articles for Fox News. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. But even I sometimes wonder whether something has been generated by a headline maker or indeed made by a headline generator. True or false? Civil service is full of trans activists. Let me start again. Civil service full of trans activists sabotaged my leadership, Liz Truss tells Republicans. Talking about the deep state is mad enough, but talking about trans activists sabotaging her leadership is, I'm afraid, absolutely bonkers. I was slightly wary of using the language of mental illness because one doesn't want to malign genuine sufferers, but I think mad and bonkers are just about acceptable because I don't know what other word to use. Is insane more palatable? I ran for office in 2022 because Britain wasn't growing, the state wasn't delivering. I wanted to cut taxes, reduce the administrative state and take back control. What I did face was a huge establishment backlash, and a lot of it came from the state itself. Power used to be in the hands of politicians, and now it's been moved to quangos and bureaucrats. You find a democratically elected government actually unable to enact policies. That is so far removed from the reality that everybody paying attention would recognise that I don't think there is a better word to use than either insane or pretending to be insane in the membrane. You remember that she sidelined the OBR, the things she might loosely describe as being instruments of the state. Kwasi Kwarteng took the decision to completely ignore the Office of Budgetary Responsibility. She fired the most senior civil servant in the Treasury, if memory serves, because he was likely to say, this is a really bad idea. She cut the Bank of England out of the loop so that she could actually enact the policies that she claimed she was prevented from enacting. And do you remember what happened when she enacted them? Of course you do. The global financial markets, the ultimate check, if you like, upon economic policies in general and reckless politicians in particular, the global financial markets went absolutely tonto. Britain was brought to the brink of unprecedented collapse. Billions and billions of pounds were wiped off our economy precisely because her policies were enacted. After she cut out of the loop, all of the people she's claiming now stopped her from enacting her policies. There is no word better than insanity to describe what Liz Truss is currently engaging in. And you would have to be made of stone not to smile wryly at the sight of her sitting next to Nigel Farage at this American congregation of some of the grimmest and ugliest individuals ever to pollute public life on either side of the Atlantic. So I wrote in my book about the Faragification of the Conservative Party, by which I simply meant the inflation of lies and liars with a fat side order of jingoism and racism. But I hadn't fully accounted for where that madness takes you in terms of conspiracy theories. A former British Prime Minister, I think she's got more hours on the clock in cabinet than pretty much anybody else since 2010. And yet here she is complaining about a deep state and complaining about quangos and bureaucrats, none of whom managed to prevent her from actually introducing the single maddest piece of legislation that the United Kingdom has ever seen, up to, I would argue, and including the poll tax. I can't use that word on the radio, Laura, in Renfrew, and if I were to sanitise it slightly by, for example, saying bat excrement, it wouldn't sound as good bouncing off my... Well, I can probably say it on the radio. I can. I heard it on Radio 4 the other day. Michelle Hussein said it about 5 times in the course of one interview. But I won't, because Keith gets very upset by that kind of thing. 10 minutes after 11 is the time. So there it is. Liz Truss has gone completely bonkers. So did Parliament yesterday, from many perspectives. I wonder what you think happened. Let me have a look at the criticism that I am receiving. Keir Starmer may be pleased by outsmarting the SNP yesterday, but I doubt Anwar Sarwar, that's the Labour leader in Scotland, is as pleased. He will be aware of the outrage up here at Westminster, once again showing that we don't matter. That's a really important point that I suffer from a little bit of London-centric myopia as well, because for a Scottish person and for a Scottish nationalist in particular, the idea that your rights were ridden over yesterday, I do understand why that trumps the detail. I do understand why me saying, why does it matter? The motion that got nodded through was as near as damn it to the motion that you wanted anyway, as Stephen Flynn conceded on the newsagents earlier this week. Keir Starmer couldn't really whip his MPs to vote for something that accused Israel of war crimes, but he could perfectly happily watch them vote for a ceasefire. And what the amendment did was make that distinction clear and possible. But the point I think a lot of Southerners, a lot of English people miss, and Welsh people, and Northern Irish people, a lot of non-Scottish people miss, is the insult, the perceived insult that Lindsay Hoyle dealt to Scottish independence in general, but the SNP in particular. And that was, sorry, when push comes to shove, if Keir Starmer asks for a biscuit, I'll give him yours. I've got that right, yeah? If you're cross with me from an SNP perspective, that's what you're cross about. Keir Starmer asked for a biscuit and Lindsay Hoyle gave him yours. And that is a valid grievance. I'm going to do a little bit of cognitive dissonance now, as is my prerogative. It is a valid grievance, but it is dwarfed by the enormity of what was actually under discussion yesterday. And that is why I probably also reject the always sober analysis of Daniel Finkelstein this morning, which is that this is somehow comparable to those egregious breaches of parliamentary process and tradition visited upon us by everybody from Boris Johnson to Jacob Rees-Mogg, and pretty much everybody in between, actually. But I could be wrong. Hey, I suffer from footballification, not as much as some people, but certainly in the context of wanting a new government, wanting to get rid of this lot after 14 years of misery, pain, austerity, poverty, sewage, cost of living crises. I could go on forever. I often do. I don't think it's a particularly dangerous bias to just think, I think we've had enough of this lot now. That's all. 11:13. Lee's in Newport. What happened yesterday, Lee?
Lee, James, thank you very much for taking my call. You totally, I was going to say a lot of whataboutism from you this morning, but to be honest with you, I totally agree with what you just said then in your monologue, and they've been here 14 years, so they've got to go now. Just phoning up then regarding what happened yesterday. It was an opposition day, wasn't it, for the SNP? They've been clear with their Gaza ceasefire notion ever since October the 8th. Also, as you know, the SNP leader, Mr. Yusuf's family, was stuck in Gaza.
Yes.
And they couldn't get out. But also as well, what I found out last night as well, that Mr. Hansen Yusuf's brother-in-law is actually a doctor in the hospital and chooses to stay behind, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, with the...
But that doesn't give the SNP ownership of the issue, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, I agree with you. I agree on that. But, right, now, if Hansen Yusuf's brother-in-law is in this hospital, while bombs are going all around, now, basically, Israel's blowing up hospitals without sufficient evidence. That is what is going on. That's what they're doing. So,
well, again, I've got to be the referee now. So, well, they would claim that they had sufficient evidence. They would claim that.
They said...
You're talking about Ramzi El Nakla, the brother of Mr. Yusuf's... Oh, no, you're not. You're talking about a different brother-in-law. He's the one who's been arrested. My apologies. The one who's in Gaza at the moment, working in a Gazan hospital. You're quite right.
Exactly. No, basically, they said that it was like an underground headquarters under Al-Shifa Hospital. Obviously, they wasn't. Do you know what I mean? They wasn't.
Well, they posted pictures of something, but what are we digressing a little bit? Just get straight to the nub of it.
Yeah, sorry, I will. Now, basically, why couldn't Labour vote for the what was it? The
collective punishment.
The collective punishment. No,
it's a war crime. It's a war crime.
Let me just put. Yeah, there's a war crime. Exactly right. Now, if they vote on that, what that could also will have done, right? That could have put pressure, right, on Israel.
It wouldn't, mate.
It could have.
It wouldn't.
Of course, it could have.
Of course, it wouldn't.
Because let me finish, sir.
I am going to let you finish, but you'll still be wrong.
Yeah, there was. Basically, as well, it was indiscriminate bombing. That has also been admitted by President Biden as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we know that a majority, a percentage of it. But you're covering. It's almost as if you've rang the wrong phone in.
Basically, what I feel.
You phoned. We've done these phone-ins, and we will do them again. But we're not.
I'm not going through that part. I'm just going back to what I was saying.
Go on then.
I feel right. There has to be pressure now asserted onto Israel. There has to be, James. There has to be. There has to be a stop to this. So. Basically, if they would have voted on that, it would have helped to put pressure, not exerted straightaway pressure. It would have helped to build.
But it wouldn't have gone through. It wouldn't have gone through. But it wouldn't have gone through.
UN investigators in there to investigate.
But it wouldn't have gone through.
Look what is really going on inside.
No, okay, I hear you, and I mean, we're not going to fall out. It wouldn't have gone through though. So I mean, your hypotheticals are built upon a presumption that's false. Would I like to see some of the stuff that you've just described? Do I agree with your analysis of some of the things that you've just said? Yeah, but the point to which they were all leading us doesn't exist. It wouldn't have happened. Thank you, Lee, and thank you for indulging my impatience as well. I mean, Leslie says, I'm Scottish. I don't feel any insult from Lindsay Hoyle's decision yesterday. I feel disappointed in the SNP's cheap politicking. They could have worked with Labour. But you're obviously, forgive me, Leslie, but you're obviously a very pro-union, I would argue, and therefore you see this as an opportunity to have a swing at the SNP. Who can challenge the idea that the SNP have a very valid grievance about having their... What's the best way of putting it? What's the best way of putting it? Because it can be portrayed and will be portrayed as petulance, particularly the marching out of the chamber, the storming out of the chamber, while complaining that everyone else was treating it like a pantomime. It could, but I think I underestimated at 10 o'clock the impact upon an SNP supporter of seeing your people sidelined and dismissed and ignored. I don't personally think that that's a big enough grievance to justify calling for the Speaker's sacking or the Speaker's resignation, but I do want to record the fact that I do appreciate that, depending partly upon your politics and your relationship with Scottish independence in general and the SNP in particular, it's that, there you go, it's the Proclaimers trap. I don't understand why you let someone else rule your land cap in hand. Whenever I find myself struggling to fully grasp Scottish nationalism, I genuinely find that lyric incredibly helpful. So if you are feeling that way and you're looking at what happened in Westminster, then obviously you're going to be livid. And almost vindicate. You see, I told you, when push comes to shove, it doesn't even matter what we do in the House of Commons, because they'll change the rules to suit themselves. And by themselves, and this is another very helpful key to understanding the SNP, by themselves they mean Labour and Tory. They mean the two main parties. They mean the Westminster establishment. When push comes to shove, they'll always get their own way, and we can whistle for it. And I feel that. I really do. And I'm sorry I didn't fully appreciate that earlier. But I still don't think it's enough to justify either calling for the sacking of or the resignation of Lindsay Hoyle, or disrupting events on this specific issue to such a degree that it's all anybody's talking about today. It's 19 minutes after 11. It is 22 minutes after 11. And we continue the question of precisely what happened in the House of Commons yesterday, and I'm genuinely a lot clearer than I was at 10 o'clock this morning. I've apologised already for not being as across the facts as I would normally be of a morning. I was very simply very busy yesterday, so that's the way it goes sometimes. One of the reasons I was busy yesterday was because I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Bernie Sanders, the former American presidential candidate. It's mad, isn't it? The stuff stuff you know but you don't know. He got, I think, 46% support when he challenged Hillary Clinton for the Democrat nomination to fight that presidential battle against Donald Trump. I mean, that is as near as damn it. And you consider almost all of his support came from grassroots supporters, small checks of less than $200. He's an incredible man. Very, very rarely, when you meet someone whose reputation is extraordinary, very rarely are you disappointed. You thought I was going to say the opposite then. Because there comes a point where, and it's happened to me once or twice, obviously, but it depends who you're listening to when they're telling you that somebody's extraordinary. If you're listening to sensible, honest people and they tell you that someone is extraordinary, then there is a presence in the room. There really is. Even for someone who is essentially very self-effacing and who, from an interviewer's point of view, this is a nightmare. He doesn't really like talking about himself. He wants to talk exclusively about the issues. And from an interviewer's point of view, it's going to be the shortest full disclosure ever on Friday. We barely touched 40 minutes because of his schedule, but I got 40 minutes with Bernie Sanders. And if you hear him talk about the threat that Trump poses to democracy, not just in America, of course, but the obvious likelihood of him drawing some sort of a alliance with authoritarian leaders right across the world, it's obvious that he is, if not in Putin's pocket, then certainly a fully signed up member of the fan club. And the threat that Bernie Sanders articulates to what you could describe as the world order, if you like, posed by Trump is massive. And Liz Truss today is endorsing his presidential campaign. Liz Truss is endorsing Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And Boris Johnson has made similar noises in his ludicrous Daily Mail column. Absolutely extraordinary, really, to reflect upon that. And as we reflect, I don't know how much time you should give this Liz Truss story. Here it is. Here's what she said. People are joining the civil service who are essentially activists. They might be trans activists. They might be environmental extremists. But they are now having a voice within the civil service in a way I don't think was true 30 or 40 years ago. So we just have a wholly new problem. And frankly, 100 political appointees doesn't even touch the sides in terms of dealing with them. Truss pointed about 100 people from the Tufton Street nexus, from the incestuous web of secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks. You make a list, you start making a list of all the people that found their way into the corridors of power from that completely unqualified, unaccountable, secretly funded cabal, and you'll still be here on Friday. You'll still be writing names down this time next week. And she, of course, needs a conspiracy theory to account for the scale of the failure that she presided over. Whose fault could it possibly be that Liz Truss was a disastrous Prime Minister? Ladies and gentlemen, we have the answer. Trans activists in the civil service. I mean, surely there comes a point... No, there doesn't, does there? That's what she's signed up to now. She's gone full Trump. She's gone full Trump. She's gone up is down, black is white, left is right. She's gone absolutely Orwell, hasn't she? Freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. She's gone completely I'm going to say crackers. A couple of you do still have, and I don't mean that in a sniffy way. You are unhappy, uncomfortable with phrases like mad or bonkers. So I'll go for. Can we say crackers? She's completely crackers, dangerously, hideously crackers. She has gone full Trump, 100% Trump. Why did you wipe £30 billion off the British economy with a economic policy that you forced through against the advice of everybody qualified in every position of authority, from the Office of Budgetary Responsibility right through to the Bank of England? Why did it fail so horribly even after you forced it through? Answer: trans activists stopped me from forcing it through. That is a level of absurdity that is impossible to analyse. This is the thing you realise when someone goes full Trump. We could sit here for days asking what has happened here. How does that... And we'd be wasting our time, because it is a bit like the person who insists that the moon is made of cheese, even after you've put a lump of moon in their hand and told them to bite it. And they bite it and all their teeth fall out and they go, yeah, definitely cheese. That how you can't analyse that. And that's where she's gone. You may argue that she was there all along. Personally, I disagree. She campaigned for Remain in 2016, so at least she was tethered to reality then. But that is quite an extraordinary decline, unique perhaps in the annals of British politics, to achieve the highest office in the land and then to go completely crackers. Completely and utterly crackers. Introduced a policy that brought the country to the brink of economic destruction, and now claims she wasn't able to introduce the policies that she wanted because of trans activists in the civil service. What is it about being trans that makes you opposed to national bankruptcy, do you think? I'd have thought everybody had a problem with the country going bankrupt, but apparently it's those good old trans activists that really led the... like I say, I don't know where the line is. You've got to talk about it, because it's Blackadder Wibble. You're quite right, Craig. She's gone underpants on head, pencils up nose. But he was pretending. David is in Dumfries. Back to yesterday in Parliament. What happened, David?
Well, just before I get to that, here's a word you could use to describe some of them, but they're numpties.
I like that word a lot. It's a noun, though. It's a noun. I need an adjective.
Yeah, well...
Numptish?
Numptish.
Go on, what do you want?
In terms of the collective group of them in Parliament, I think Robert Burns got it right when he called them a parcel of rogues.
A parcel of rogues, indeed.
Getting to the Speaker, I'm of the opinion, and I believe this genuinely, that he did the right thing yesterday.
Okay.
He did the right thing because there is a diverse range of opinion on how this country should react to what Israel has done in Gaza and what Hamas did in Israel. And there needed to be a broad discussion and then vote. So I don't know what his motivations were. I just think he did the right thing, and I'm sure Lord Centrine would be very proud of him. So we then have to ask the question, and I watched the whole of this yesterday, by the way, for my sins. I don't know if you sit and watch a whole sitting of Parliament, but I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
There was a lot of passion, there was a lot of common sense, and there was contributions from right across the chamber. So he achieved that in the first instance. So what happened that turned it into total and utter chaos? And that rests solely with the government benches and Penny Mordaunt as Leader of the House. It was only when she stood up and said, "We're not very happy with the Speaker." I was going to say something else there. "We're not very happy with the Speaker. We're not going to put our amendment up." And it was at that point the whole thing fell apart. Now, let's try and be a bit analytical. I mean, we don't know things for certain, but why did they do that? Why did the Tories, at the end of a very lengthy debate, decide to withdraw their motion?
Yes.
I would speculate, and it is speculation, but I would speculate they suddenly realised they were going to lose the vote.
And that is certainly what's being reported.
Well, absolutely. So,
let's do the other thing. Let's do the Sherlock Holmes, shall we? What's the alternative analysis? Why did the Tories essentially go home instead of actually engaging in a vote on the debate that they had just conducted? Why did they? If not because they thought they were going to lose.
Well, I can't think of a rational reason why they would have done that, other than the fact that they were going to lose. Can you think of one?
They were so cross with the Speaker, is what we're being asked to believe, isn't it?
Well, see, now this is a standard political ploy, isn't it? You want to divert attention away from what you've just done by pointing the finger elsewhere.
Yes.
So they pointed the finger at the Speaker. And what saddens me about the SNP's then response was to just literally fall in line with that without questioning what had just happened. The first thing Stephen Flynn should have done is stood up and said he was disappointed in why the Tories had withdrawn their amendment. But no, literally when you were watching it, that was missed completely. I mean, the only person I think that noticed it was the what they call them deputy speakers, was the deputy speaker. So anyway,
so you're not. I like this analysis, but it does tamp down the issue of protocol being breached, doesn't it? And I know people are arguing that it was not unprecedented, and I think they've got history on their side, but it's certainly as rare as hen's teeth, and whenever it does happen, it seems to happen to the SNP. So that grievance is real, even if you feel that Stephen Flynn could have handled the circumstances better. The grievance is real.
Well, I mean, I'm not a supporter of the Scottish National Party.
I kind of work that out, David.
However, I've got a lot of friends who are supportive, a lot of people who voted yes, and I do my best to try and understand their point of view.
Yes.
However, there is a problem with their political view of the world, and that is an awful lot of what they think and then act upon is based on grievance rather than anything else. So you used the word grievance, I didn't,
no.
But it's interesting that is where they come from. There has to be a reason to be aggrieved about something rather than to stand back and say, well, why did this happen?
Yeah, but I don't, I probably am closer to your friends on that, your SNP supporting friends than I am to you, because I understand the relevance of that last point about why did this happen. But look what they've done again. They've treated us like the poor relations. They've treated us like the domestic staff. This was our day. We only get 3 a year. And they've taken it off us and given it to Keir Starmer. I get that. I also get the argument that I have enormous sympathy for, that the issue under debate was more important, and getting an actual motion through Parliament calling for a ceasefire, I would argue, should have transcended everything. But that perhaps is because I'm not wedded to the need for Scottish independence. Unlike you, David, I think if I was Scottish, I probably would be, but I'm not. So that's a counterfactual we don't need to explore any further. It is 11:34. I do have another question for you after this, and we've got another guest on the way as well. And then, of course, it's Mystery Hour. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It's 11:38. I'm going to cross directly to the House of Commons, where the shadow Speaker of the House, Lucy Powell, is addressing the issues that we've been talking about all morning.
Over us. threats, intimidation and security concerns. I mean, it's remarkable. I know it is of huge concern to Mr. Speaker too, and something which keeps him awake at night and is his first priority. And can I join him in praising the security team working to keep us safe? Of course, the legitimate lobbying of members is part and parcel of our job and our democracy. That at times can be robust too, and we can all disagree strongly. Yet we are increasingly seeing a line being crossed. I know members feel uncomfortable discussing their experiences for fear of attracting more unwanted attention, or because we don't want to come across as whinging when we have such privileged positions. But during recess, we saw another line crossed with the intimidation of a member and their family at their family home. Reports that other organisations will be targeting the homes of MPs ahead of and during the election have caused huge anxiety too. It's a totally unacceptable development. Oh, no noise for that one. Not just for MPs, their families, neighbours and staff, but it's anti-democratic and undoubtedly now starting to affect people's decisions and their behaviours. That is wrong, and we must do more to address it. So does the leader agree with me that the police should take a much more hardline approach to so-called protests taking outside the homes of members of Parliament? Can she confirm that police should use powers they have to stop such protests and confer the guidance we issued? Does she also agree with me that we need to look at the causes, not just the symptoms, of this sometimes toxic and febrile environment? First, that we have a duty to be careful with our language and how we conduct ourselves, how we challenge one another, and how we should avoid stoking division. Next, that more should be done with extra powers given to regulate social media and elsewhere to tackle the spread of mis- and disinformation, deep fakes and other dangerous material. And also, with the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and hate, can the leader confirm that the government will actually bring forward a hate crime and extremism strategy with some urgency? And finally, that the Defending Democracy Task Force should now have a broader remit to defending democracy.
It is 11:41. Lucy Powell, the shadow leader of the House, to which we crossed perhaps a little late for the main thrust of her intervention, which was essentially to endorse and enforce Speaker Hoyle's rationale for the decision that he made yesterday, the decision that has so enraged the SNP, quite understandably, and about which the Conservative Party are pretending to be hugely enraged, also quite understandably, given that they reportedly didn't actually have the numbers to carry their own or to defeat the Labour motion in the House of Commons. But it is essentially a reiteration of the Speaker's claims that he did what he did because if Labour MPs hadn't been able to vote for a ceasefire and Keir Starmer felt he couldn't whip them or allow them to vote for a ceasefire that included the accusation that Israel had engaged in war crimes, then they would face particular unpleasantness, protests, threats of violence, and of course there is always the possibility of worse. That figure of MPs who've signed this vote of no confidence motion, if you're interested, has now risen to 58. I haven't really got time, but I'll try. I can take a couple of calls on this, but I want you to meet this guy shortly. One of the things that happened at PMQs yesterday I thought was very interesting because the post office scandal needs solutions. I've seen Kemi Badenoch tweeting all week about who's telling lies and who's doing this and who's doing. When you'd have thought, as Secretary of State for Business, you'd have one job at the moment: get them the bloody compensation. Just get them the compensation that they so richly deserve. And the compensation that they're being offered seems to be, shall we say, suboptimal. So who is going to raise? Who is going to speak for these sub-postmasters? If it's not the government, who could it possibly fall to?
Fears of delay, Prime Minister, or cover-up are causing them anguish. And yesterday, Chris Head, once accused by the Post Office of owing more than £80,000, he said this yesterday: there is a lack of transparency. We need to see the correspondence between the Post Office, the Department and UKGI, because all of the time everything gets shrouded in secrecy This is his words. Have some respect, please. He's a victim.
So the bit you didn't hear, the bit that Starmer was responding to was saying a party was it shameful party politics? Someone shouted party politics, and Starmer took particular issue with that. It occurred to me when we were listening to it yesterday, it'd be quite interesting to find out what Chris Head thought about it. He's having his plight described in Parliament, which must feel like the judgment day almost for sub-postmasters who felt abandoned and maligned and, of course, criminalised for years. And then as he does so, a member of the government accuses the leader of the opposition of playing petty political games for the alleged offence of speaking up on their behalf. So we'll hear from Chris shortly, and we may also hear from you on the question of what happened elsewhere in the Commons yesterday. But can we just very politely free up 2 phone lines, because things are very, very, I don't want to say constipated, very busy at the moment. You want to have a crack at this? Because I read some, I don't read all the texts that come in, but here's what I want. What did Labour do wrong yesterday? Labour, not Lindsay Hoyle. What did Labour do wrong yesterday? 0345 606 0973, because there are a few texts. Here's one. I'll read you a couple. Feels like you're on damage limitation mode for Starmer this morning. Every day Starmer conducts affairs in this manner shows that he's no different from the people he keeps telling us are the bad guys. I have no prizes for guessing where the loyalties of someone like that lie historically. But what exactly is it that the Labour Party are supposed to have done wrong yesterday? Because you can tell me that Starmer's awful, or you can tell me that I'm shilling or being a client journalist, but you need to tell me what Labour did wrong yesterday, and I'll tell you whether or not I agree. Can we do that? Would that be a civilised way to conduct ourselves? What exactly is the Labour Party accused of doing, except trying to essentially prevail over a very complicated political landscape? Of course, you can be furious with them for succeeding, but what did they do wrong? What was the misstep or the breach? What did Labour do wrong? 0345 606 0973. It's 11:46. It's 10 to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It was during PMQs yesterday that Keir Starmer sought to raise the continuing plight of former sub-postmasters, criminalised, in some cases prosecuted, and in almost all cases falsely accused of all manner of egregious crimes, chiefly theft, of course, that were the consequence of a deeply flawed computer system deployed by the Post Office. But Keir Starmer took the a relatively unusual step of citing one by name yesterday, and it was the response from the Conservative benches that prompted, as you'll hear now, the disquiet from the Leader of the Opposition, the complaint that his opponents on the other side of the House were not behaving with due respect.
Fears of delay, Prime Minister, or cover-up are causing them anguish. And yesterday, Chris Head, once accused by the Post Office of owing more than £80,000, he said this yesterday: there is a lack of transparency. Mm-hmm. We need to see the correspondence between the Post Office, the Department and UKGI, because all of the time everything gets shrouded in secrecy. This is his words. Have some respect, please. He's a victim.
There is the issue, really, the complaint. I thought we'd catch up with Christopher Head, who was the youngest ever postmaster when he took over the job, and who, as you've heard in our news, stood accused of £80,000 worth of theft. There are two questions, really. One's personal and one is rather bigger, Christopher. The first is, what does it feel like when your name pops up like that in discussion after years, presumably, of thinking that your plight was never going to be properly resolved? And secondly, what is the current state of play with regard to the compensation that you and your compadres so obviously deserve?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a shock. I mean, I knew that Kate Osborne, my MP, had a Prime Minister's question that she was going to raise, but I didn't have any idea, or neither did she actually, that Keir Starmer was going to raise it in his debate with the Prime Minister himself. So, I mean, obviously it's nice to be mentioned and recognised. I mean, that's definitely this case. And obviously he'd obviously seen the tweet that I'd replied to one of his front benches, saying that this whole scandal over the last 20 years has been shrouded in complete secrecy, by refusal to release documents and all this kind of thing. And this row with Kemhemi Badenoch and the sacked chairman Henry Staunton is, brought into the forefront that if it's true that they've done nothing wrong, then they will have no problem releasing the said documents because there's nothing to hide, right? I mean, that's how it's done.
You'd think so. I think there's a danger, isn't there, that given the success of the ITV drama in propelling your plight into the spotlight, there's a danger, given the amount of coverage it received and the amount of political response that was reported, that people think it's actually resolved. But of course, what you and your fellow falsely accused postmasters are now reporting is that you are a very, very, very long way from satisfactory resolution. And I know it has been suggested that some of the compensation offers being made are close to paltry.
It is. I mean, and this is the problem. That what seems to be forgotten here is that this is actual people's lives that's being affected. And we can listen to all of the infighting and war of words, but that doesn't help the victims anymore. I mean, the dramas has propelled this into the top news agenda now, which is helpful. But like I said, yes, I mean, we saw the debate even this morning that under an urgent question from Kevin Jones is that there is a huge problem with the compensation across all of the schemes. I mean, not just a small number. I mean, obviously they mentioned my case and Alan Bates's case. There's obviously two more high-profile ones. But the offers coming out the door are nowhere near their promises of which is full and fair compensation.
Which is extraordinary, really, when you reflect upon the strength of public feeling generated in large part, as we say, by that drama. How feasible then do you think it is, and you don't have to answer this, Chris, you really don't, but how feasible do you think it is that they are deliberately dragging their feet ahead of the next election so that it becomes, A, something that doesn't appear on the balance sheet yet, and B, a nightmare that the Labour Party, who are expected to win the next election, would then be required to solve?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say in terms of that. I mean, the amount of money that's taken, it is a lot of money in terms of the finances, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not. So I mean, it doesn't appear to me as to why that would benefit them in any kind of material way. Had it been talking tens of billions, maybe that would be a different story. But like you say, is it a way that obviously to drag it out into, say that they will deliver on their promises, right before an election and then hand it over to another party? I mean, that could be the place. But this is the reason why, what Keir Starmer raised on my behalf is that this is the reason why them documents should be released, because then it would prove without doubt that there is no issue there.
And I mean, I suppose it's more of an emotional response than anything else to the sight or the sound of a Conservative politician shouting, "Playing politics," when Keir Starmer raises your situation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I tweeted out yesterday, I said, look, this is not about playing politics. This is about people's lives, and it doesn't matter which party is in power. At the end of the party that's there at the particular time is the one that's there to deal with the issues at hand. And, we can talk about politics all you like, but that's not really where the crux of the problem is it? At the end of the day, people have been promised full and fair compensation to do things in a speedy manner, and it's just not happening. Have
you got an idea in your head, Chris, about what full and fair compensation looks like? I'm thinking of a formula or an algorithm rather than a number, because the number will be different for every case. What could Kevin Hollinrake or Rishi Sunak or a future Prime Minister or future Post Office's Minister, what could they stand up tomorrow or this afternoon and say that would make you think, crikey, I can have a rest now?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, to be fair, I have actually met with the Minister Hollinrake and his officials just over a week ago.
I saw that, and you were quite impressed, I think, by his behaviour.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I do feel that they're trying to do the very best, but obviously there's some arcane rules and things that are preventing this to be delivered. And my suggestion originally was, when you prepare a fully quantified claim, remember, it's not put together by ourselves, but by forensic experts and your tax records, why on earth they cannot put a 25% down payment as an interim payment of the total value of that particular claim on the table to say, we are committed to delivering that full and fair compensation. There is a down payment to prove our commitment. And then there we will go on to fully assess the claims and to put some kind of deadline in place. And we will make a full offer within 60 calendar days. And if we do not achieve that, there will be a financial penalty, on Post Office or the government for not achieving that.
Well, you make it sound quite straightforward.
Well, I've made this. I just wrote a long tweet this morning just after the debate, and obviously suggested it, and it really could be that simple. It just needs somebody to sit down and really want to deliver it, I think. So, we'll see. I've mentioned it to the Minister again, so we will see if there's any kind of response to that tweet.
Well, keep us posted, won't you? Seriously, and do come back on again if you feel that the wheels aren't turning quickly enough.
Yeah, will do. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Christopher Head there, who, as you've heard, was accused of £80,000 worth of theft by the Post Office, and who is one of a long line of former postmasters, sub-postmasters, still waiting for satisfactory compensation. We're going to run out of time. Mystery Hour is next, but I want at least one person to tell me what Labour did wrong yesterday, and that honour falls to Gabriel in Battersea. Gabriel, take it away.
Hi there, James. How's it going? I watched yesterday's the debate yesterday and the vote yesterday. It's my first time I've actually watched the entire process from beginning to from start to finish, and I watched it in dismay, and it just felt quite grubby, the whole thing, and disgusting. And I tell you what I think Labour did, and I'm actually a Labour supporter myself, is the whole core point of this, and this is what they're missing, is just a ceasefire. We need the bloodshed to stop. Yes. The fact that they're playing semantics with the wording of, whether it's a sustainable, unsustainable, or whatever, I think that's what's created the issue.
But I think it was more the phrase collective punishment, wasn't it? It was more Starmer, who is, of course, has been an international human rights lawyer, being uncomfortable with the essential levelling of or description of Benjamin Netanyahu as a war criminal.
Well, I mean,
that's a bit different. That's not really semantics, mate. I mean, if it was you being accused of being a war criminal, I don't think you'd call it semantics.
But look, I mean, but right now, I don't think Israel or the Israeli government really cares about what we're saying.
That's true. That's true. But neither does it make what you've just described as semantics. They're not semantics.
No, but I think this was an opportunity for us to show unity in Britain. The majority of people want the bloodshed to stop. We've already
huge majority.
Exactly. So all we needed, they could have quite easily backed the SNP motion.
But they couldn't because of what I've just told you about the war crime element.
But ultimately, the SNP motion was, all these extra...
I think your argument is the wrong way around, isn't it? Why couldn't the SNP back the Labour motion?
But the SNP was the one that put this motion forward.
But that accused the war crime allegation, and Keir Starmer's made it clear he couldn't countenance whipping his MPs to vote for a motion that would describe Israel as war criminals. And whether you agree with it or not, that is a very rational and sensible position, and yet the SNP were the ones who couldn't bring themselves to vote for the ceasefire. The Tories couldn't bring themselves to vote for the ceasefire, which is what you're saying Labour should have done, and Labour's the only ones that did.
Well, Labour have not taken this position up until recently, only because of the pressure of the constituents.
It's not the pressure of their constituents, is it? I've changed my view on it since the middle of October, because the notion of proportionate response and Israel's right to self-defence has been superseded. They have gone further than people believed they had the right to go. That's not pressure from constituents, that's an observation of events.
But I think earlier on, after a month after the invasion of Hamas of Israel,
yes.
The response already at that point.
But that's a very different conversation. You have come on the radio to say Labour should have been more committed to the ceasefire when they're the only ones that in the event there wasn't a vote, but they're the only ones who supported it yesterday. So how does that work?
They supported it because obviously the Conservatives
the question's pretty clear. How can you be criticising Labour for not supporting the ceasefire when they're the only ones that did?
They did support the ceasefire, and so did the SNP. They're not the only ones. Obviously the Conservatives didn't support the ceasefire because they never did. Their position was clear from the beginning. So
again, in a sentence, what did Labour do wrong then when they supported the ceasefire?
Yeah, I think it's just the wording that they've put into the actual...
Well, we're back to where we started now. That's accusing Israel of war crimes, which he didn't want to do.
Which he didn't want to do, but it's pretty evident there's been war crimes committed.
Well, that's not for you to say, and Keir Starmer doesn't think at the moment that it's for him to say either, and he certainly doesn't think it's for the SNP to state on a motion, and I think probably he was right. It is 12:01. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is Thursday, which means, all things being equal, it should be Mystery Hour after this.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Hello. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. I thought I'd just read a couple of these out to give you a flavour of the last 2 hours of the programme that you may have missed. Jamie in Glasgow writes, "O'Brien, you are far too clever to be acting this stupid." Well, this text from exactly the other side of the field says the vote was never about Gaza. It was all about trying to embarrass Labour, and when that didn't happen, they threw their toys out of the pram. But I think I'll leave you with this one. That was the most boring 2 hours of your show I've ever listened to. Thank God for Mystery Hour. The second bit of that sentiment, I think, is something with which we can all agree. I suppose technically you'd have to believe in God, which probably excludes many people. But on we go. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. If you have a question that needs solving, a mystery that needs unravelling, I don't know, a conundrum that needs fixing, then you know what to do. And once you've done it, someone else can ring in and provide the answer. That's pretty much it. My favourite contributor wins a Mystery Hour board game. There's no particular criteria for this. It's a bit like being in a nightclub. The management's decision is final. If you're not on the list, you're not coming in, or something like that. And, of course, if you are not lucky enough to win a board game, you can still buy one from mysteryhour.co.uk, where hours of fun to be had. In fact, a pal of mine, I think I told you this last week, plays it without the board, just uses the cards as a kind of dinner table game, or when you go out to the pub game and you want to play a game with the kids over the meal. It works perfectly for that as well. But anyway, find out more about it at mysteryhour.co.uk. And if you're not familiar with it, then just stick around and you soon will be. Let's start in Winchester. Tom is in Winchester. Tom, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on, Tom.
Has there ever been a conspiracy theory that at the time was deemed crazy, etc., and derided, that actually turned out to be true?
Oh, dear. You know what's going to happen now?
Tell me.
Well, everyone's going to ring in to claim that theirs is.
Oh. You're much closer to this kind of thing than I am. Yes,
I am. I mean, the last thing we need is a bunch of people ringing us to tell us that the vaccines don't work, COVID didn't exist, the moon landings never happened, 9/11 was an inside job, and all the rest of it. So what criteria will we deploy, Tom, to determine truth or fact? I mean, I could answer this myself and take a round of applause and close it down immediately.
Oh, no.
Because I'm pretty sure that in America, in Prohibition-era America, there was a conspiracy theory that the government was poisoning alcohol in order to stop people drinking, and that actually turned out to be true.
Okay.
Does that count?
Well, I don't see how it can't. If we agree that the definition of true is some sort of emphatic...
Subsequently proved beyond doubt that it actually happened.
Then you have answered my question. Well, you've given an example. Maybe other ones that might be interesting, but I'm
going to leave it on the board, but I'm not having anything that hasn't been proved beyond reasonable doubt, and that does not involve citing your Uncle Keith's Facebook page as the authoritative source for the. I like the question. What prompted it?
Well. Occasionally there are sort of, crazy stories or sort of wild reporting that makes me think, gosh, that could turn into a conspiracy theory. And then on some occasions, I've been close to them, so I can, ask someone who is actually close, and they go, "No, It's just lazy reporting." And you must get this all the time.
A little bit. No. I mean, it goes up and down. Obviously, during lockdown, the whole COVID period was particular, and still is. In fact, as Rachel, thank you, Tom. You're on the list. Have any conspiracy theories, or possibly even what's the biggest conspiracy theory that turned out to be irrefutably true? But as Rachel Clark told us actually on Monday, didn't she, the doctor, palliative care doctor and author who wrote the book upon which this ITV drama Breathtaking is based, told us that she was braced for all manner of abuse from people who refused to believe either that the virus was real or that the vaccines were an effective way of controlling it or limiting its spread. And she was right. Everything from death threats down, directed at doctors. I mean, crikey. It's a mark of how mad things can be. 9 minutes after 12 is the time. Alan is in Liverpool. Alan, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on, Alan.
TV announcers.
Yeah.
I think are they called continuity announcers?
I believe they are, yes.
Who tell you what you're about to watch.
Yeah.
In between announcements, what do they do?
What do they do?
Because if they're getting paid 30 or 40 grand a year for every hour or so saying the news is on next, great job.
It's not a bad job watching telly. It's a bit like working in a chocolate factory, though, isn't it? I bet that actually if you had to watch telly all day, every day, it would get boring pretty quickly. But I can think of
what I'm saying is, do they use them as researchers or editors or something in between?
I wouldn't have thought so, because they've got to be there in case things go wrong, haven't they?
Yeah. So they're just going to be sitting there twiddling their thumbs. I mean, if they put Ben Hur on BBC,
on the BBC. I mean, I take your point because there's no adverts. They've got a nice 3 hour
Yeah.
3 hour fit. You could have a nice snooze, set an alarm. But Ben-Hur could go wrong halfway through, so you've got to be on constant alert. I don't think it's as easy. The more I think about it, the less easy it sounds, actually. Constant alert. It's a bit like Keith's job, you see. So Keith is listening to this programme, supposedly, and I don't think he'll mind me saying, I'm not sure this is actually the case, but supposedly he's listening to this programme more closely than everybody else.
Has he got his eyes closed?
He does occasionally look a little soporific, but only after he's eaten a banana. And so he's waiting to hear if you, for example, swear or libel somebody. Or
he's like a coil spring.
Yes, he is like that. And he's got a variety of ways. There's one big button, actually, that he would press in the event of you doing something that we can't risk being broadcast. And the delay would kick in. But what you wouldn't do if there were no adverts, you'd just say, well, he just sits there for an hour, doesn't he, waiting for the news, and he has to fire the news. He has to alert the newsroom. So I think it is actually a little bit more.
The broadcasters aren't really getting much bang for the buck, though, are they?
You wouldn't. I'm putting it on the list.
If nothing goes wrong.
I'm putting it on the list. The question becomes, what do continuity announcers do the rest of the time?
Continuity announcing.
Yeah, when they're not continuity announcing. They used to be on screen. How old are you?
I'm 62.
Yeah, you remember then. They used to be on screen. They used to be local celebrities. Do you not remember? It would cut back. There was a bloke on ATV, or Central as it became. His name was Mike Prince, which is a fantastic name for a TV type. And he was a celebrity in his own right, despite, as far as I recall, he was only the continuity announcer on regional ITV.
All right. And I've noticed up here, I'm on in Liverpool, that occasionally we get announcers with northern accents. Now, are they heard all over the country, or are they regionally accented?
Well, all I can tell you is that here in London, I also get continuity announcers with northern accents. So I presume that it is.
So you get one called Katie. She sounds like she's from Chorley,
and she tells you who they tell you their name now, don't they? They say, "I'm Alan. I'm with you for the next whatever," and up next it's Pointless or you know, some antiques business. There's always some antiques business on. You're on. I like it. What do they do the rest of the time? Although I suspect the answer is relatively obvious and actually quite a lot, but I like that question. I think Mike Prince actually opened the fete at my sister's school once. Such was the status of his celebrity back in the day. 12:13 is the time. Terry is in Chelmsford. Terry, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
Now, this is a question that keeps me awake at night, bizarrely, because it's about sheep.
Oh, yeah. How apt.
No. Yeah, I've been working on that all day, and I'm here all week. So the word sheep, it's singular and plural.
Yeah.
Now, I'm struggling to think of another animal that's singular and plural.
Fish.
I mean, you don't have sheep.
Fish.
Now, that's what your researcher said, but you can have fishes, can't you?
Yeah, you can have fishes. You can have sheeps.
So, no, you can't have sheep, can you?
Yeah, you can.
How can you?
Yeah.
If I was to say to you...
You can have what you want, mate. It's my show.
How many sheeps have you got? You'd say, what? Sheep? Where did you go to
several
school?
sheeps. Yeah, I take your point.
Have you ever heard anyone say sheep?
No. Llamas, giraffes, lions, tigers... Fishes. Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes. He sleeps with the fishes.
He doesn't sleep with the fish, does he? Or the sheep?
Oh, I'm waiting for my text. What I'm doing, I'm keeping you talking while my texts ignite. And people
Googling it.
No, I'm not Googling it. I'm keeping you talking while someone send it to me.
Okay.
I'm just waiting to see. No one sent anything yet, Terry.
Yeah.
It's all clear so far.
Yeah.
Nothing happening there. I'm an ITV announcer. I've got this one, and we just sit there and watch the. I've got one. Ready?
Right.
Ready?
Go on.
Deer.
Deers. Can you have deers?
Just refresh the old screens. Yeah, I'm just refreshing the old screener-rooney. See if I can get another one.
No, I think you can have deers.
You can't have deer. No, that's like two old deers. That's D-A. That's D-E-A-R, you cheat. It's not D-double-E-R, is it? Two old deers.
Well, what about moose? Is that a moose or mooses? Mises? Does that work?
Meese is the plural of moose.
Is it?
Yes.
All right,
this is several meese.
No, that's something from a kid's cartoon. I hate those Mises, isn't it? When it's
Buffalo.
Tom and Jerry.
Buffalo.
Buffaloes. No, you have buffaloes.
No, buffalo. A herd of buffalo.
Yeah, but you can have two buffaloes. You don't say, look, there's two buffalo.
Buffalo.
You say two buffalo. Buffalo.
Two buffalo, isn't it? Two buffalo.
Ah, no.
Cattle?
I think it's...
No, cattle doesn't work
but
because
that's
you
the
don't have a
correct
singular
term.
of cattle.
It's not
Deer is... I mean, lots of people are just... I mean, zebra. You say there's two zebras.
Zebras?
Yeah. So what's the question anyway?
Why is it that it's singular and plural? Why can't we say sheeps?
I like it. It's a good question, actually. So how many sheep have you got? 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep, 4 sheep, 5 sheep, 6 sheep, 7 sheep, 8 sheep. Yeah, all right, you're on. It rings a bell, actually, Terry. I think we might. Someone might even be in the board game, but if I can't remember, it never happened. That's the rule. That's how it goes.
I can't think of anything else that
wildebeest.
Beasts.
Wildebeests. Antelope.
Yeah,
Well, stop sending me these stupid antelopes. These are all mooses. I think the plural of moose is moose, actually. 2 moose, 3 moose, 4 moose, 5.
Well, I don't know.
6 moose,
James,
7.
I work on this stuff all week, longing for Thursday.
Well, here it is. Here's your this is to paraphrase Martine McCutcheon. This is your moment.
Thank you.
Let's find out for you. Why is sheep the same word for singular and plural? Why? And if you can come up with something else to which that applies, I do not know. It is 17 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. My old mate, this is something that you say as a radio presenter, once you achieve a certain status, my old mate Gordon Astley has been in touch. He was a brilliant broadcaster back in the day in exactly the same patch where Mike Prince worked as a continuity announcer, and he tells me that his dad was an InVision ATV announcer. I did not know that. You can come on, Gordon, but only if you can get through. I can't be doing VIP treatment, even for a mate. You've got to come through the switchboard like everybody else does. But the question and also it may have changed since your dad's day. Have people been listening to this programme for long enough to know what should immediately spring into your mind when you hear the name Gordon Astley? I say, Gordon Astley sent me a text. The finest radio jingle in the history of radio jingles. Do you remember it? Gordon, Gordon. I used to sing it, but I'm getting too old. Gordon, Gordon, drives away your boredom. If you wake up feeling ghastly, tune in to Gordon Astley. One of the great curses of being called James O'Brien is that I will never have a jingle as perfect as that.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
21 minutes after 12. It wasn't an invitation to you to write some, but I'll read the ones that you have sent in. James, he shoots them down in flames. If you prefer the truth to lying, tune in to James O'Brien. But the problem is there's no G on the end of my name. A lot of you have gone for this. It reminds me of the great Steve Wright, actually. It's serious jocking. If the world makes you feel like crying, why not tune in to James O'Brien? I quite like that one. This one less so. James O'Brien. He makes you so bored you want to iron. Yeah, thank you. And James has his own board games. If you're sick of Tories lying, tune in to James O'Brien. They're not really... I mean, you think you're proving my point, actually. A lot of you going for that. James loves playing games. If you're fed up of the lying, tune in to James O'Brien. Oh, that's no, maybe. Anyway. Hannah is in Woking to take us back to the serious matter of Mystery Hour. Hannah, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
So we say that there are some animals that mate for life, kind of penguins, swans, etc.
Humans.
Humans, yeah, exactly. Is that true all of the time? Obviously not for the humans' case, but for animals' case. Does that mean that they never break up, or are there some times that there are breakups when either
There was a story about this not long ago, wasn't there? I can't remember what it was, but it may have even been in a zoo. Is it 2 animals that mated for life broke up? One of them went off with another one. Would it be pandas? No. I don't know. So that's the question. So a species that ostensibly mates for life... we're not going to find like the one that has done it for longest, but we just like a penguin leaving Has a penguin ever left a penguin? It sounds like a riddle.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but why do they? What do they?
Hang on, you're only allowed one question, Hannah. You get the what or the why. So,
okay.
If you came to me and said, I read a story about 2 penguins in Dudley Zoo who'd been together for 40 years and then he left her or she left him, why? That would be permissible. But your question is already, has a penguin ever left a penguin? So you can't then add a why to it.
No, okay, fair enough. I'll go for the what then.
So a species that ostensibly mates for life has split up. Actually, now I want to know why as well.
Exactly.
If it happens. All right, I'll see what I can do. I wouldn't hold your breath on this one. Seriously, keep your receipt, because I don't know that we're going to get a full full answer to it. I don't know who would know. But I've got a vague memory in the back of my mind. Someone else says, I'm sure it was pandas. Thank you, Hannah. Jason is in Chiswick. Jason, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
I'm the ITV announcer, and we sit and watch telly in between announcements.
How long is
Simple
a
as
shift?
that.
How long is a shift?
I've been doing ITV announcing now for about 14 years.
Really? And how long is an actual shift? When you're in the job.
Say that again, sorry.
How long is it? I don't know why I'm shouting. You're on the phone, not in the next room. How long is an actual shift? So how many hours do you do a turn without a break?
So we used to do daytimes as well. But we start at 4, and our last announcement is going into the news at 10.
So that's you. You do 6 hours.
6 hours.
I like it. And all you do, you sit there waiting for the telly, and if something goes wrong, either an alarm goes off, you'll always get an instruction, will you? Or are you autonomous? Do you make a decision to actually cut in? And
No, we'd get an instruction. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a basic standard one. If the TV falls off air, for instance, it happened to me once when this morning went off air for 12 minutes, and I sat there for 12 minutes saying, we are hoping to fix the issue and get back to this morning as soon as we can.
And that was it. You didn't take the opportunity to give them some of your best material.
Gags.
What? Yeah.
No.
Wait, mate, that could have been a Hollywood movie. Everything could have changed that day, Jason.
I wish I had now. I wish I'd done it now. Never mind.
How much freedom do you have? Is it scripted, or do they trust you to do it yourself?
We get a synopsis about all the programs and stuff, but we write all our own scripts, and they all get approved on a daily basis. And then it's down to us. Sometimes we'll back reference if something's worth, like if someone wins big on the chase or something.
Yes.
Or things like that. But no, it's standard stuff, really.
And how much variation is there in the amount of time you have to fill? Because some programmes, presumably, they come in a bit under what was scheduled for, and some come in a bit over.
Yeah, so basically an ident, I'd say on average, an ident is a thing going into a programme.
Yeah.
And we usually get about 10 seconds, or it's up to 15 seconds sometimes to talk. We'll never really fill that, though. And on the end credits, it's usually a 15-second menu to say what's coming up or to point to other things, like, for instance, on ITVX and things like that.
Of course. I like it. That's a very comprehensive answer. When are you on next?
There you go. 29th. I'll be back in on the 29th. That's my next shift.
Everyone's going to be listening on ITV1, on normal ITV, 4 p.m.
ITV1.
4 p.m, 29th of
4
February.
PM.
Right,
Exactly.
it's a
Listen
date.
out for me.
We'll see you there, Jason. Mind out. Have a round of
mate.
applause in the meantime. Top man.
Thank you, sir.
You take
Cheers,
care.
mate.
I'll see you in the Chiz one day, no doubt. 26 after 12 is the time. Lucy is in Greenwich. Lucy, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question about, when you're young and you have a temperature, and your mum would get a cold flannel out and put it on your head and keep wringing it out until your temperature went down.
Yeah.
Well, apparently that's deemed dangerous now by the NHS, and they just say you should give them Calpol. But
Really?
it doesn't. Yeah, really. My grandson keeps on having heat seizures because she's not getting the flannel out because she's told it's dangerous.
But who told her it was dangerous?
The doctors, the hospital.
Really? A cold flannel?
Yeah, really. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to. I don't doubt you.
Baffled as me, James.
Well, I just don't. I don't know if it's true. I mean.
Well, that's what she's been told, and he's had them 4 times.
What's he got? What's the condition? Sorry, I don't want to make light of
So
it.
say if you got a temperature.
No, I know that. I know that. I know that. But I'm pretty sure the NHS advice is still to stick a bag of frozen peas on your head, wrapped in a tea towel. So, what is wrong with your grandson? What has happened to your grandson 4 times?
Well, just getting a temperature, with,
that's it?
Fluid type thing.
All right.
And then the next thing is having a seizure.
Oh God. Okay.
I know. I mean, I know that the actual having a heat seizure isn't dangerous, has no long-term
Get it for a
damage
bump
or
on the head.
anything.
You'd use a cold comp for a bump on the head, but for
Well, you would,
temperatures,
wouldn't you?
I don't. So what's the question?
I mean,
Why
it's
is it
been
dangerous?
Going on forever. Why is it dangerous? Why can't she do that? Bring the temperature down? Because my mum did it and I did it for my children.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if anyone from the NHS has got the answer to that,
I'm
really
working
like
on
to
the
know.
presumption that you're right. You see. So.
Yeah, well, do because that.
Well,
is
I
what
have
she's
to,
been
don't
told
I? Okay.
Countless
So
times.
why has she been told? Why has Lucy's daughter been told countless times not to put a cold flannel on her grandson's head when he's got a fever, when he's got a temperature?
Yeah, Thank you, James.
No, thank you, Lucy. I shall try and get you an answer. It's taken me by surprise, that one, as you can probably tell. Matt's in Sheffield. Question or answer?
Well, it's a question, but I've got an answer for that last caller, but I really want my question answering, so
Fair
I'm
enough.
not going to answer that one.
No, well, you're not allowed to anyway, although I was quite tempted to let you for some weird reason.
I'm qualified. I'm a children's nurse.
Should we do it? No, should we let him do? But no, all right, Keith. Sorry, mate. All right, mate. All right, Keith.
Rules are rules.
Yeah, okay, okay, Matt. Okay, carry on. I invented the rules.
Good. Right. So anyway, it's my daughter's 13th birthday today.
Oh, happy days.
Thank you. Children's birthdays, filling up helium balloons.
Yes.
Always makes me think, when I'm filling the balloon full of helium, is the can of helium getting lighter or heavier as it empties?
Remind me why it might be getting lighter. Because the helium's coming out.
I think it's getting heavier because the helium's coming out.
But the helium is lighter than air. It's not lighter than a vacuum.
Yeah.
But
the can's full of helium pushing it up.
Yeah.
So as you empty it, it should get heavier.
But because that presumes that it's filling up with air rather than a vacuum. There's an empty helium canister is either full of air or full of a vacuum, isn't it?
Oh, you're right. So what does a vacuum weigh?
Well, nothing.
I don't know. My shark's quite heavy.
And that's why. Oh, I see what you did there. That was awful. That was absolutely appalling. If you'd said Dyson, I think the joke would have landed sooner, wouldn't it?
I don't have a Dyson.
No, I know you don't have a Dyson, but it's a bloody joke. It doesn't have to be fact-checked, does it? Honestly. But I think that's why the canister is so thick, because it is a vacuum, and if it wasn't, then the pressure would... Do you remember at school when you did it with an oil can? Did you ever do that?
School, no.
You put a bit of water in the bottom of an oil can, and then you put it on a Bunsen burner, and all the steam forces all the air out of the can, and then you screw the lid down tight, and the steam condenses, leaving a vacuum behind, and the pressure actually crushes the can from the outside. You watch the metal can crush without anyone touching it in real time. That must be why. That must be why the canister you described, and we've all had them on our daughter's birthdays. That must be why the canister is so thick.
Qualification?
Well, I don't know, but Keith's shaking his head.
I agree with Keith.
Right. So does a helium canister get heavier or lighter as you use it?
Yeah.
All right, you're on. What else have you got lined up for the birthday girl?
Making sushi later, because we're trying to be very middle class.
Oh, well, I like that a lot. Fantastic. Have you bought the little mats that you roll it in or something?
I've already got them. We like a bit of sushi.
Is it? And what? You special delivery, or do you just go down to the fishmongers and get some nice stuff? How does it work?
No, I wanted some fresh tuna because we eat it raw, but it's Tesco in Alfred doesn't have any. So,
are you going to do the voice with the helium thing when the kids are there?
You have to.
You have to do that. Finally, a bit of advice for you, Matt. Seeing as you, like me, are a middle-class seafood aficionado, I had an oyster yesterday. I actually bought some oysters and took them home, and I ate an oyster, and then probably unwisely, immediately after eating an oyster, I ate a couple of mini eggs, a couple of Cadbury's mini eggs, and it had never occurred to me before that an oyster shell, a little splinter of oyster shell, is very, very similar on the tongue to a little splinter of Cadbury's mini egg shell.
Oh.
And the last thing you want to do is crunch down on a little bit of oyster shell thinking that it's a little bit of Cadbury's mini egg shell. You can have that for nothing, mate.
Thank you. Advice taken.
It's 12:32. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It is a phrase I use a lot, but it's been a very accurate one over the last 14 years. Client journalism was dedicated not that long ago to wondering whether, I'm sure in very, very good faith, wondering whether the Labour Party's decision to resile from its £28 billion commitment to net zero spending, and of course the short delay caused largely by the Daily Mail's failure to publish all of the information it had about the Labour Party candidate in Rochdale immediately, was perhaps signs that Keir Starmer's grip on the leadership was loosening. I think I heard some people suggest that he was standing in front of an open goal and fluffing it. And so interesting to see the first YouGov poll that has come in, fieldwork done on the 20th and 21st of February, which has Labour 26 points ahead of the Tories now. The Tories back on 20 points, down 4. Labour up to 46. And that, of course, has unfolded after the Rochdale unpleasantness and after the net zero massive U-turn, depending on what newspaper. So there you go. It's only a poll, but an interesting one. Let's get back to Mystery Hour. It's much more interesting. Glenn's in Basildon. Glenn, question or answer?
Answer, mate. Sheep and pluralisation, and what's all that about?
Yeah, go on then.
So basically, the original word for sheep is the Anglo-Saxon sheap, S-C-E-A-P. And for some reason, it wasn't plural then either.
Yep. Well, that's not good enough. For some reason, that's not like you.
No, seriously, this is one of the first. It's actually pronounced sheap. S and C in Old English makes a modern SH sound.
Sheep.
Sheep. So, but sheep. Yeah, something like that. But this actually came up in the very first book I read on Anglo-Saxon language and Old English.
Oh, yeah.
And he literally states in the book, the author, he's like, and nobody knows why that particular word, or several other, like fish, for example, again, although you can pluralise fish in modern English, in Old English you didn't.
In modern English, I think if you've got species, two different species of fish, you talk about fishes plural.
In Old English, there is no plural.
Is that right?
It's just fish. And again, fish is spelled F-I-S-C. So in Old English.
That's
but again, there is no plural. But what we can do, and this occurred to me while I was on hold actually, we pre-pluralise the word. So we say, look at that sheep or look at those sheep.
Oh,
and
yes.
in Old English, you would say either fat or thumb, as in that and them.
Are you getting better? When did you first ring me with your Anglo-Saxon scholarship?
About 10 years ago.
It was about 10 years. And over that decade, have you got better?
I'm better at picking it up. Definitely, and I'm better at hearing it a little bit more.
Right.
I don't hear it spoken very often.
Well, you wouldn't, would you, Glenn?
No, not really. Unless I go on a YouTube video or watch a TV show where they speak it, but very rarely.
Do they get it right in things like in some of those old dramas? Or are you talking about Open University?
Before I went off Vikings, I kind of picked up there a few times. And sometimes when I listen to poetry online or something, I can pick up bits and pieces, and sometimes I can pick up whole sentences, which is always a little bit exciting.
Wow. Have you got any mates that you can talk to? Is anyone else doing it?
I do have a friend who is fluent and actually a written author on the subject.
Wow.
But I don't see him very often. He's one of my lark buddies, and I don't see him very often.
Well, you could phone him.
No, he's too busy. He's busy. I don't know what he does now.
He's one of your what? He's one of your what buddies?
Live action roleplay buddies. I met him for live action roleplay hobby years ago.
Fair enough.
And he's one of the guys that actually put me onto the right sources and all that.
That's just fascinating.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you another round of applause. Have you got a game yet?
I do. Thank you very much.
No, I thought you did.
You've already offered me two.
I know. Well, that goes to show where my enthusiasms lie, doesn't it? I'll tell you what, it's like a hack, this. If you want to get the Mystery Hour board game, then phone in and speak a bit of Anglo-Saxon. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah,
have another round of applause going. Stay safe. Mind how you go. And if you can't sleep tonight, try counting skiap. Rick's in Stourbridge. Rick, question or answer?
I got a question.
Carry on.
When you're looking something like Ant and show, and he put a question out.
Phone line's a bit weird. What's happened to your phone line? I don't know what's happened to your phone.
Hello, can you hear me? Still
That's
in the same
better, yeah,
spot?
well done. Carry on.
When on the television, when they open the lines for a quiz,
yes,
they always have to have a phone line you can phone,
Yes.
a text message,
Yes.
or a PO box number.
Yes.
Why is the PO box number always Derby?
Is it always the same PO box number?
I cannot answer that question, but it is always Derby.
Fair enough.
It's also it's ITV. It's also Channel 5 as well. So why Derby? Why not London?
I think that there will be one company that handles this. Literally one company that handles all TV competitions where there is a legal requirement to offer people the opportunity to submit a free, because the text and phone lines will be premium, but you can always enter these competitions for free. And I don't know what the ruling is based on, what the law is, what the precedent for that is, or the rationale for that is, or the provenance indeed of that law is. But the only answer that makes sense to me would be that there's one company that runs that option for all TV competitions, and it is in Derby. It must be.
So that's not a definitive, so that's just your opinion, James.
I mean, this is true, although I find as I get older, the line between definitive and opinion gets ever thinner, Rick. But no, you're quite right. That I do not know that for sure.
You could be right. You could be. It sounds right.
It sounds better than plausible. It's almost Occam's razor territory, isn't it? Or you know, once you've eliminated the impossible. You're on. Okay. Why? Is it always Derby? Of course, someone could ring in and say, I saw one yesterday, and it was Hemel Hempstead, and then the whole thing falls apart.
Oh, no, it's not. I've been seeing this for years and many years. Many years.
And do you ever enter? Do you ever do it?
Usually by text. If I wouldn't write in though. By text.
Even though it's free?
Yes.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't. You probably find out not many actually probably do it that way.
I'd love to know if anyone's ever won.
Maybe some of your old dears.
Well, imagine if you won. Has anyone ever won? So there's you sending off your premium rate text every day, and someone around the corner has just sent a stamped address postcard or something, and they've won £50,000 and a holiday in Tenerife.
Yes, you never see it advertised, do you?
I'll find out. Well, I'll try. Why is it always Derby? The TV competitions that allow you to submit a postal entry. The address is always in Derby. Why? 0345 6060 973. Paul says, why didn't the ITV continuity announcer, it's Jason, wasn't it, get a Ray Liotta? And then Paul adds, I may need the Ray Liotta explaining. Because there's loads of them. We'd already heard from Gordon, whose dad did it, and I named two in the call, or at least one in the. So it needs to be. I mean, it was close. I won't lie. It was close to a Ray Liotta, but he's not on air again until February the 29th, and today is February the 22nd. So that means there's at least another week's worth of continuity announcers at that single station alone. So there's too many of them for it to merit a Ray Liotta, Paul. It's got to be more remarkable than that, is the short and largely unsatisfying answer to your question. So these questions need answers. What's the best conspiracy theory or biggest that turned out to be true? Or any, actually. We've done that one. Is there a species that is supposed to mate for life, but actually didn't once? Like a penguin left a penguin. 0345 6060 973. Lucy is convinced that her daughter has been told not to put a cold flannel on her grandson's forehead when he has a fever. Why? Not why is she convinced, but why has she been told that? 0345 6060 973. As a helium canister empties, does it become heavier or lighter? 0345 6060 973. And why are all of the addresses for TV competition postal entries in Derby? 0345 6060 973. It's 12:45.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It's 12:49. I think I have to tell you what happened then, don't I? Okay, sorry. Just bear with me a moment. Put something. Have we not got an emergency tape or so? Play a bit of music. We got a jingle or a clip. I had a mouthful of melon. Well, that'll go out on YouTube now, won't it? Will that go? Oh, no. Oh, that's terrible. Well, if you care enough to find out, you can have a look later. It doesn't go live. YouTube's not live. It's not like a live feed. It's it goes out later. So we could edit. Can we edit it out? How hard would it be to edit that out? What do you mean you're not editing it? It's my show. I don't want it going. I don't want people to see me doing that with a melon. That's career ending, that kind of thing. Anyway, I do apologise for that little snafu as we returned from the break there. I was simultaneously negotiating a melon and having a conversation with the producer and getting prepared for the next stage of the programme. And they say that men can't multitask. Grant's in Woking. Grant, question or answer?
It's an answer, James. How are you?
Very well indeed. Carry on.
So, have you ever heard of MK Ultra?
Is it a toothpaste?
No, it isn't. It's an actual conspiracy theory that turned out to be true.
Oh, brilliant. Go on. Tell me more.
Yeah. So I've got to be really quick because I've got to jump to a meeting in a moment.
Okay.
But I'll give you the quick details. Basically, post World War II, the CIA are in the Cold. America's in the Cold War. They commissioned the CIA to start looking at ways to mind control people or like brainwash them and do all of this stuff. And they start experimenting with drugs and other sorts of stuff, particularly LSD, to experiment on Americans and stuff like that to see if they can brainwash them, mind control them, or anything else like that. Most of it is kept hidden underground, but there's people that think that something is going on, and then it ends up getting disclosed in the 70s. I thought it was the 80s, but I just double checked. But it was post Watergate. It got disclosed that the CIA were attempting to mind control people.
They had indeed sought to use drugs for government mind control.
Precisely, that's it.
I love it, and that means that people got dosed without knowing.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm not.
It's not funny then, is it?
But no,
the kid at college
really
never recovered from an LSD trip. It was horrible, absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. No qualifications.
I was into conspiracies and all that when I was a kid. I'm completely fine now.
Oh, well done. Big round of applause for Grant, please. Good luck at the meeting. Of course, speaking of conspiracy theories, the Trump-appointed prosecutor looking into ludicrous allegations made about Joe Biden and his son is currently looking at claims from the man they've arrested for lying that he was given the false information by Russian intelligence, which is pretty close to a conspiracy theory coming true, except it's not the conspiracy theory that the conspiracy theorists wanted to be true. It's the conspiracy theory that the people who generally laugh and point at conspiracy theorists knew might well be true. Allegations about the Bidens coming out of dealings in Ukraine having their roots, it would appear, with Russian intelligence. Completely false allegations. Not that will stop anybody in Donald Trump's camp from continuing to believe that they're true, up to and quite possibly including Liz Truss. Martin's in Glasgow. Martin, question or answer?
I have an answer.
Carry on.
I have an example of adultery in the animal kingdom.
Fantastic. That's the phrase we were looking for. And I like the way you sound like a Presbyterian preacher when you say it. Adultery in the animal kingdom. I can see the fire and brimstone behind you, Martin.
Yeah,
Go on.
My middle class Scottish accent has caused that. So my wife is a zookeeper, and she was looking after penguins for a period of time.
Oh, yeah.
We had Damo and Pete were a couple. They were partnered up for their adult lives. And enter Cliff.
No.
He was a new penguin, and he caught Damo's eye, and she left Pete. She left him, moved out.
And got on with Cliff?
Yep, Cliff was the new mate.
Cliff and Damo sitting in the tree, Kissing?
Yeah, something like that.
And how did Pete deal with this? Do we know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% sure if penguins feel emotions like that, but he was definitely down in the dumps.
Wouldn't be very happy about it.
No.
What zoo was it, if you don't mind me asking?
It's Blair Drummond Safari Park.
Oh, okay.
Stirling.
Yes. No, I haven't been there because I've been to Edinburgh Zoo and they do a wonderful behind-the-scenes trip that I did with my daughter, of which the highlight is the penguins. You get to feed the penguins and stuff. They're magnificent little creatures, aren't they?
They are.
Really good. Well, that's a brilliant answer. I mean, not only have you provided evidence of it actually happening, but somehow the fact you've provided names gives it a whole new dimension of delight. Damo, Cliff and Pete. There's a film there, isn't there, to be made? A little waddling off over the sunset while Pete looks on disconsolately. Round of applause for Martin, please. Which you must share with your wife, Martin. Fair's fair. That's 12:54 is the time. Matthew's in Orpington. Matthew, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on.
So it's about the
not being told to use a cold flannel when your child has a temperature. So the caller was right in saying that there's a risk of having a seizure or febrile convulsion.
Really?
But yeah, so especially in children, and it can be obviously very traumatic.
Of course.
So they've done several trials where they've compared just using a cold flannel or sponge versus giving paracetamol or Nurofen, and basically the cold flannel and sponge works for about an hour and a half,
yes.
And then the temperature comes back, whereas paracetamol or Nurofen, they last a lot longer. So basically it's just not as effective as giving medication. And so what they don't want is the sort of confusing message where parents get falsely reassured by using the flannel.
So tiny risk of convulsion, febrile convulsion, but actually more pertinently, paracetamol much better.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want, so someone uses the cold flannel, they take the temperature, it's come down, and they feel reassured. And then actually in an hour's time, it goes back up.
Qualifications?
So I'm a doctor and, treated kids with lots of temperatures in
That'll
ED.
do. That'll do nicely. So Lucy was right, and now we know why. Round of applause for Matthew, please. Dr. Matthew, no less. Thank you, Matthew.
No, Matthew's fine. Thank you.
Cheers. 12:56 is the time. Rob's in Sidcup. Rob, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
Why is all competitions in Derby?
Yeah, go on.
What?
Well, you know what, don't you?
Why are all the competitions in Derby?
Yeah, but I love that you're pretending to be a normal caller.
There are two main companies
Yes.
who do competition verifications for accounts, and they are Nunkey in Derby and the Royal Mail, and most broadcasters use Nunkey.
And they're based in Derby, so that PO box
And they
is
are
in
based in
Derby.
Derby.
So I was right, but I couldn't go definitive, as Rick pointed out, because I didn't have the evidence in place. But you've even named the company. Qualifications?
It's my job.
Compliance.
I work in broadcast compliance.
Round of applause for Rob, please. Don't go away. Have you always worked in compliance, broadcast compliance, Rob?
No. I've worked in the media for many years.
Have you ever worked in radio?
Yes.
Have you?
Yes.
Any
had a wonderful time.
Any achievements in radio that my listeners might be interested in?
Greatest achievement in radio,
Yeah.
I believe, as it's now in print, I can say it is. I gave you your job.
Who, me?
You.
You put James O'Brien on the radio?
So I'm either the most loved or the most hated man.
It's one or the other. 52-48 last time I checked. Another round of applause for the magnificent Rob Hooker, please. It's been too long. I'll see you soon, Rob. Take care. 12:57 is the time. Robert's in Manchester. Robert, question or answer?
Hello, it's an answer, but I'm not in Manchester. I'm in Kent. But
Well, I'm sorry, I can't take this call then. I've already reached my Kent quotient for the week.
Right.
I'll have to find someone. No, Carrie, you must have been in Manchester last time you rang me. Anyway, quickly, we're going to run out of time. Go on.
Yeah. No, it's about the helium when you're emptying it out of the can. The density changes. It goes back to schoolboy physics and the old Boyle's law and all that, where the volume of gas increases as the pressure decreases. So in effect, you've got more in the bottle. The bottle's a fixed volume. You're putting more in as you charge it, so it gets heavier. And obviously, converse to that, as you empty it, it gets lighter. Yeah.
But there's no vacuum involved because it's never completely empty.
No.
The helium is
Pressure.
expanded because it's no longer pressurised, so it can't get forced out the top. Qualifications?
I'm an engineer. I'm in refrigeration and...
phone line's gone funny, so take your round of applause before it falls apart. That's fantastic. Well done, Robert. I'm going to give it to the penguin guy, but I wrote down Cliff, which was the name of a penguin, as opposed to the name of the caller. What was the caller called? Martin. Not Cliff. I mean, you can share it with Cliff if he wants. No, Cliff's happy. Cliff's the one that ran off with Damo. It's Pete that's not got any partner. He might. Anyway, that's enough. Martin gets the ball game. That's it from me for another day. If you missed any of today's programme, you can listen to it on Global Player, where you can rewind and indeed pause live radio. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now it's time for Sheila